Chapter 1470. Wang. In the dark temple, two extremely violent curses shook and swept out like a storm. As if fighting for the ownership of space, they collided and squeezed each other, causing the space to tremble and shake. Noah and Athena's eyes met, and their eyes burned with an astonishing fighting spirit. Although they called each other fated and ill-fated, in fact, if one really wanted to count, this should be the first time Noah and Athena had a battle to the death. When they first met, Athena had not yet recovered her identity as the queen of the divine realm, and Noah had just obtained his authority and become a god-slayer. Both of them were not mature. At that time, although Noah and Athena had a short confrontation, it was indeed quite short. They did not even exchange a single move, so it could not be considered a battle at all. Therefore, this was the first time Noah and Athena had a real battle in the truest sense. However, the fighting spirit in their hearts were unusually high. Gazing at Athena, who was standing in front of the throne, wearing an ancient Greek-style dress that swayed back and forth under the huge waves of curses, Noah's mind moved. In his body, the energy source that was filled with boundless energy suddenly turned into a source of divine might. The divine might energy surged towards Noah's limbs like a torrential stream. Athena was not only the goddess of the earth, but also the goddess of darkness who dominated the underworld, and the goddess of wisdom who controlled the wisdom of the heavens. Because she was always accompanied by these three attributes, Athena was the goddess of the Trinity. Now under the night, Athena's divinity as the goddess of darkness had greatly increased, and on this invisible island, the earth attribute, which symbolized the snake, had also greatly increased. In this case, the miraculous effect of the demon slayer to break the power of curses would certainly greatly reduce the threat of the goddess of earth and darkness. After all, the demon slayer could even kill Demon King Solomon, who had the power of the dark elf king who could control the elements of darkness. Its holy characteristics were undoubtedly the most lethal weapon for the goddess of death and darkness. The godhead that represented the Athena serpent was Medusa. The evil eye of this demoness could turn everything in her sight into stone. Even the godslayer's curse resistance could not completely block it. However, if it was the curse-breaking power of the demon slayer, it would definitely be able to break the petrification curse. In addition, Noah's ultimate sword skill was a combination of sword skills and divine power. Without divine power and the fairy device, its true power could not be unleashed. Therefore, when the battle was on the verge of breaking out, Noah did not hesitate to transform the energy in his body into the source of divine power, and used the weapon refinement magic. Clank! A dazzling white light blossomed from Noah's hand, converging into the shape of a sword. The silver holy sword flashed in the dazzling light, and fell into Noah's hand. A large amount of divine power was immediately poured into the demon slayer, causing a dazzling white light to shine, dispelling the surrounding darkness and illuminating the entire space. Oh, what an unpleasant light! Athena frowned her beautiful eyebrows, but then smiled pleasantly. However, if it's not to this extent, then it won't be interesting. As soon as she finished speaking, Athena's figure suddenly turned into a dark shadow, and like a materialized darkness, she swept toward Noah. A dense darkness appeared in Athena's hand, and converged into a huge scythe that fell into Athena's hand. Let me see if your light is stronger, or if my darkness is stronger. After saying this, Athena, who had turned into a shadow, shot in front of Noah. The pitch-black scythe in her hand cut through the air, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, drawing a perfect arc, and heavily chopped towards Noah's throat. Noah, who had long been prepared for battle, tightened his grip on the silver holy sword, and the divine power in his body surged. His footsteps slightly slowed, and then his whole body turned into a bolt of lightning, violently rushing out. Absolute Sword Technique. Initial form Purple Lightning. The Purple Lightning sword skill was one of the most commonly used absolute sword skills. This was because the average person would not be able to deal with the thrusts that were as fast as lightning. As long as there was a slight delay in reaction, the user of this absolute sword technique would be in an invincible position. Once, Versilia was instantly defeated by Renasubel's Purple Lightning, and her mind was distorted because of it. In other words, if one could not even withstand the initial form of the absolute sword technique, then the opponent was not qualified to make the user of the absolute sword technique use her full strength. Therefore, the user of the absolute sword technique would usually use the initial form of the Purple Lightning. Noah was the same. Thus, a strike comparable to lightning directly swept out, violently stabbing the pitch-black scythe that was chopping towards him. Clang! In the sound of a bell, the holy sword and the black scythe suddenly collided, setting off a circle of strong wind sweeping out. Then, with the sound of water being poured on fire, in Noah's hand, a dazzling white light flashed from the silver holy sword on the black scythe, expelling the fog that was surging on it, dispersing it. Seeing this, Athena bit her lips and was speechless. Sure enough, it is an unpleasant light. Hearing this, Noah laughed. Chapter 1471. A storm of black wind rose from Athena's body, like a burning black flame that kept rising. In the dense darkness, Athena's figure floated like a feather. Her body was enveloped by pitch-black flames and she raised the black scythe in her hand high above her head. Then, Athena's voice resounded from the darkness. Light can indeed expel darkness, but darkness can also devour light. My fated enemy, let Athena's darkness devour your light. In the midst of Athena's loud declaration, the darkness that was like a burning black flame suddenly twisted and turned into a giant black snake. Athena, who was floating at the 7-inch position of the giant black snake, swung her black scythe down in Noah's direction. As Athena's black scythe slashed down, the pitch-black giant snake made of dense darkness lifted its huge head and aimed at Noah, as if it was hunting for food. The upper half of its body suddenly rushed out. The giant black snake's body was quite large. Although it was not as big as the giant dragon that Letitia had summoned using the sun of Ophiuchus constellation as a medium, its head alone was as big as a city. However, the head of the pitch-black giant snake was as big as a building. Therefore, when the entire upper body of the giant pitch-black snake suddenly swooped down and opened its huge mouth that was filled with dense darkness in Noah's direction, Noah's entire vision was blocked, and his clothes fluttered wildly under the attack of the wind and waves. It felt as though an entire pitch-black mountain had suddenly smashed down from the sky and was pressing down on Noah, causing his scalp to go numb. Even Noah had the same feeling. Therefore, Noah knew very well that Athena's words were not wrong. Even if the demon slayer had a strong restraining effect on darkness, if the target of the sword was too dark, it would only be devoured instead. If the demon slayer in Noah's hand was the elven magic device of the strongest sword spirit, then perhaps with Aster's power and the support of Noah's endless divine power, no darkness could devour the light of the holy sword. However, Aster was still sleeping to awaken his true power. The demon slayer in Noah's hand was only an imitation made with the weapon refinement magic. Although the weapon refinement magic imitated the weapon's performance would not be weaker than the original, there were other restrictions. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, and the White Dragon Emperor's divine dividing wings, although they could be imitated with the weapon refinement magic, they could not be imitated with the balance breaker magic. In this way, under the huge restriction of being able to use the ability once every 10 seconds, their usefulness in battle would be reduced by a lot, to the point that they would not be useful in many high-level battles. The Demon Slayer was the same. Even if it was imitated, its performance would not be weaker than Aster's before he went into hibernation. However, the imitated equipment would only have performance and not a spirit. Without the cooperation of a contracted spirit, the power of the elven magic device would be reduced by more than half. As such, the replica of the Demon Slayer might not be able to break through Athena's darkness at full power. Immediately, Noah looked at the huge pitch-black snake head that was whistling over, and a solemn expression flashed across his eyes. Thus, with a thought, Noah's divine aura source that was filled with an endless supply of divine aura in his body suddenly turned and transformed into energy once again. However, this time the energy in the source of divine aura did not completely transform into magic power, divine aura or divine aura. Instead, with a tremor, it transformed into magic power and divine aura. In the case of using two types of energy at the same time, the output of each type of energy would be reduced by half. Fortunately, the current Noah had the dragon's sovereignty of the sun to strengthen the output of the energy, greatly reducing the disadvantage of the output being reduced by half. In the next moment, accompanied by the sound of vibration, a huge golden ripple spread out from the ground in front of Noah. Immediately, a shield that was like a city wall suddenly rose from the huge golden ripple, standing in front of Noah and firmly protecting Noah. And in the instant that the huge shield that was like a city wall suddenly appeared, the huge black snake head that was rushing over also brought along a terrifying fluctuation, whistling down and heavily landing on the thick shield. Dong! Suddenly an earth-shattering roar resounded in this vast temple, and it shook the echo. Like invisible ripples, it carried a substantial impact and spread out. Pung! Wherever the terrifying shockwave passed, the temple floor that exuded an ancient aura suffered the most serious damage. Like broken glass, it burst open very simply. Even the rubble that was lifted up was shaken into powder, which was shocking. Pung! The terrifying shockwave was still spreading, causing the pillars that were branded with snake-shaped lines to shatter and crack under the impact. Under such circumstances, the stone pillars fell down one by one, making the entire temple seem like it was collapsing, shaking repeatedly. At this time, even the ceiling of the temple could not continue to maintain its original shape. In the sound of kacha-kacha, cracks kept appearing. Pieces of rubble suddenly fell from the ceiling, pouring down like raindrops. For a time, the entire temple seemed to be ravaged by an earthquake, and it was on the verge of collapse. It was only at this moment that the pitch-black giant serpent slowly lifted its upper body from the thick sand and dust that pervaded the air like a spring. Inside the pitch-black giant snake, Athena, holding a black scythe, stared at the spreading thick sand and dust, a pair of cold snake eyes flashing slightly. At a certain moment, Athena's pretty face changed slightly. At this instant, numerous black figures shot out from the dense sand and dust that filled the air like lightning. The bodies of the black shadows were silver chains flowing with golden light, and the front end carried wedges of different shapes. These chains shot out one after another from the thick sand and dust that filled the air. Like arrows that had been released from a bow, they shot towards the pitch-black giant serpent that had raised its huge serpent head. Then the chains suddenly wrapped around the body of the pitch-black giant snake, binding the long snake body. The pitch-black giant snake suddenly let out a soundless roar and began to struggle with all its might, twisting its huge snake body. However, the chains were firmly wrapped around the giant snake's body. No matter how much the giant snake struggled, there was no crack at all. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight could see the nature of the chains tightly wrapped around the pitch-black giant snake's body. She could not help but be shocked. How could this be? However, the thing that really shocked Athena was yet to come. Golden ripples suddenly flashed in front of her like water waves. Inside, there were various weapons such as swords, sabers, spears, halberds, and so on that seemed to have popped out of the water and appeared in front of Athena's eyes. Athena's extraordinary wisdom allowed her to instantly see through the essence of each and every piece of equipment like she had just done. Therefore, Athena could almost recognize them in an instant. At this moment, each of the weapons before him was a god relic that was famous in all sorts of myths. No, that was not all. Among the weapons there were even prototypes of famous god relics. Now all of these weapons were aimed at Athena. In the next second, the weapons turned into beams of light and shot toward Athena, whose expression changed abruptly. Chapter 1472. Swish, 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 swish. Amidst a series of sharp and clear sonic booms, sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of other weapons turned into beams of light. They tore through space at extreme speeds, shooting towards the giant black snake like a storm. Tightly bound by the chains, the giant black snake could not break free at all. It could only watch as the weapons turned into beams of light and shot towards it. It could not put up any resistance at all. As a result, the blades, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of weapons that shot out like a violent storm instantly landed on the pitch-black giant snake. Bang! Amidst the muffled explosion, a weapon that had turned into a beam of light exploded a corner of the giant black snake, forcibly cutting a hole in its surface. Bang 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 bang. Immediately after, various weapons such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on continuously bombarded the pitch-black giant snake's body, causing the pitch-black mist-like darkness to explode one after another, causing a series of muffled explosions to ring out. With just a single wave of attacks, the gigantic pitch-black snake was riddled with holes by the weapons that came shooting over. Every part of its body was pierced through. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black snake that was riddled with holes finally couldn't even maintain its form. Dong! The black serpent made of darkness disintegrated amidst the explosion, turning back into an extremely dense darkness. In the darkness, Athena, who was holding the black scythe, retreated as if she was caught in a storm. It didn't take long for her to break through the darkness and fly out from the other end of the thick darkness. However, almost at the same time, a protrusion slowly appeared in front of the thick sand and dust on the ground. Along with the sound of tearing wind, a figure rushed out from the protrusion in the thick sandstorm, heading straight for Athena, who was retreating in midair. Athena, who was still shocked by the sight of the god relics that only existed in myths and legends, immediately raised her head and looked at the figure that was charging at her at an alarming speed. She immediately lifted the black scythe in her hand. At the same time, Noah's figure appeared in front of Athena in a flash. His pair of deep dark eyes stared straight at Athena's slightly shocked face. He raised the holy silver sword in his hand high up and swung it down hard. Clang! The holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light with terrifying power slashed hard on the black scythe that was hurriedly raised in midair. A powerful force instantly passed through the black scythe and hit Athena's body. Under the impact of the huge force, Athena was sent flying along with her scythe. She slammed into a stone pillar covered with snake-like patterns. She didn't know what to do next. Bang! With a loud explosion, the stone pillar that was hit by Athena broke and fell to the ground with a loud crash, stirring up a cloud of dust. In the dust, Athena, who had her back hit the stone pillar directly, could not help but let out an extremely soft groan. She clenched her teeth, tightened her grip on the black scythe in her hand, and swung it forward suddenly. The dust that filled the air was immediately cut open by the black scythe, and was blown away by the whistling wind that came along with the black scythe. Then Athena saw it. Noah, who was holding the holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light, leaped high into the air. Under the soles of his feet, a circle of divine aura gathered and exploded, releasing all of it in one breath. Noah's figure turned into a ray of light and dove down at an astonishing speed. Ultimate sword skill. Form 2 Meteor. This was the derivative of the initial form, Purple Lightning. The principle used was the same as the initial form of Purple Lightning, which was to gather the divine aura under the feet and release it in one breath. It was an ultimate sword skill that could explode at an extremely fast speed. However, unlike the initial form of Purple Lightning that could only be used horizontally, the second form of Meteor was an ultimate sword skill that was used for aerial attacks and had absolute control of the air. Since ancient times, the side that had absolute control of the air would have a huge advantage whether it was in battle or war. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. After all, between an opponent who could fly and an opponent who could not, which side was more difficult to deal with, there was no need to explain. Therefore, even though the second form Meteor was only a simple evolution of the initial form Purple Lightning, turning a horizontal thrust into a high-altitude thrust, with the help of air control and the acceleration of gravity, the power and speed of this ultimate sword technique was superior to that of Purple Lightning. Therefore, Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, directly turned into a meteor that fell from the sky, bringing with it a whistling wind, and violently pierced towards Athena's direction. In the blink of an eye, the tip of the silver holy sword was less than 2 meters away from Athena. In this moment of imminent peril, Athena's body suddenly burst with a black light. This was different from the extremely dense darkness from before. If the previous darkness was said to be as dense as the sewage in a swamp, then at this moment, the black light from Athena's body was like a transparent crystal. This kind of translucent black light expanded in the air, converging in front of Athena, and in the midst of the trembling sound, the black light condensed and turned into a shield. It was a thick shield that seemed to be made of obsidian, with the head of a gorgon carved on the front. Noah recognized this shield. Its name was Aegis. In Greek mythology, the goddess of wisdom, Athena, had the head of the gorgon Medusa embedded in it, and it had the ability to petrify. The meteor sword that fell from the sky immediately landed heavily on the pitch-black shield. Ding! In an extremely crisp sound of collision, the tip of the silver holy sword violently pierced the shield named Aegis, causing a burst of sparks. Swish! At the same time, the goddess, who was famous for her beauty and wisdom, flashed out from behind the shield. The black scythe in her hand had a cold arc of light and a fatal black light as it ruthlessly slashed at Noah's neck. That attack did not even reach Noah's neck, but Noah felt a chill on his neck, causing his heart to tighten. Logically speaking, Noah was strengthened by the sovereignty of the Leo constellation's sun sovereign, so it could achieve true invulnerability and would not be injured by sharp weapons like the scythe. However, Athena's black scythe was not a simple weapon, but a power formed by condensing the power of darkness. As the god of the underworld, Athena's black scythe was like the scythe of the god of death. It could directly bring about death and harm the soul. Noah had reason to believe that even if he relied on the sovereignty of the Leo constellation to become invulnerable to weapons and weapons to block the attack of the black scythe, the power of the black scythe that could even harm the soul would definitely not be able to block it. Therefore, this attack must be blocked. Wave-like golden ripples suddenly flashed in the air. Inside, a thick shield appeared, blocking in front of the black scythe. Clang! The black scythe slashed down heavily and landed on the thick and heavy shield, causing a strong shockwave and sparks to burst out once again. At this moment, Athena's pair of snake eyes shrunk to the size of a needle. There was no other reason. The shield that appeared from the golden ripples and blocked the black scythe was very familiar to Athena. Its entire body was made of obsidian, thick and heavy. The front of the shield had the head of a gorgon. Other than Aegis, what else could it be? Kaboom! Under the impact of Athena's attack, the stone pillar that was broken in two finally collapsed, and under the tremor of the ground a cloud of dust rose. Pa! In the crisp sound of landing, Noah and Athena fell from the air at the same time and steadily landed on the ground, facing each other with the broken pillar in between. Everyone was suddenly silent. Athena, who was holding the black scythe, raised her head and looked straight in the direction of Noah. She was surprised and puzzled. Why do you have that shield? Chapter 1473. Looking at all the major mythological systems, there were only two sides to the shield named Aegis. One side belonged to Zeus, the king of the gods in Greek mythology. Therefore, the shield was also known as the Aegis shield. The other side belonged to Athena. It was Athena's god relic. From the perspective of Type Moon's worldview, if every heroic spirit's noble artifact was a symbol of itself and limited to all the myths and legends of the heroic spirit, then Athena's symbol was this shield. Aegis. It was a legendary shield that was exclusive to Athena. It was embedded with the head of the Gorgon Medusa and had the head of the Gorgon Medusa. It had the head of the Gorgon Medusa, and it had the ability to turn anything the head of the head looked at into cold stone. This shield was still in Athena's possession. Of course, the Aegis that Athena was currently using was only an authority manifested by divine power. In other words, Athena was able to use her authority to manifest the Aegis that she had used in the legends, and others could also use a similar method to use a replica of the Aegis. However, Athena sized up the shield in Noah's hand again and again. Athena was also holding a similar shield in her hand. Athena, who kept looking at the shield in Noah's hand, had to admit, that shield was definitely not a replica. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight allowed her to easily recognize the ancient aura on the shield. Could not be a replica. However, that shield was definitely not the real thing. No, that might not be correct. To be more precise, the shield was definitely not the Aegis that Athena knew of. In other words, the shield that Noah was holding now was not a replica, but it was also not the Aegis that Athena knew. Could it be that there was another side to the shield that belonged to Athena? And that side was also the real thing? How was that possible? Although Zeus also had a shield named Aegis, that shield was completely different from Athena's. The most basic difference was that Athena's Aegis was embedded with the head of the Medusa, which possessed the power of petrification. On the other hand, Zeus's Aegis had the power to create a storm just by waving it around. When it was placed in the sky would darken, but when it was picked up, the sky would clear up. The only similarity between the two was that they had the same name. Moreover, they were both made from the skin of the ewe that Hephaestus gave birth to Zeus in Greek mythology. Therefore, Athena could guarantee that Aegis, which possessed the power of petrification, could not possibly have another side to it. This was because it was impossible for there to be a second Medusa's head. But if that was the case, what exactly was the divine shield in Noah's hand that had an ancient divine aura? Even the goddess of wisdom, who claimed to possess wisdom, furrowed her brows at this moment due to the conflicting reality. No, it's not just my shield. You even used many famous god relics just now, and even the original versions of those god relics. I can't be wrong. Athena stared at Noah with her seductive snake eyes, and her tone became extremely unhappy. How did you do it? Athena did not realize it at all. At this moment, her extremely unhappy tone made it seem as if she was throwing a tantrum. Athena had to admit it. Even though she was known as the goddess of wisdom, she could not tell the truth about how Noah could use those famous god relics. It was like a slap in the face, and Athena was extremely unhappy. Noah smiled faintly and threw Aegis away, allowing the golden ripples to engulf the shield. Then, he raised the sacred sword in his hand and pointed it at Athena. Do you want to know my secret? How about I ask the goddess of wisdom to solve it yourself? What a low-level provocation, my fated enemy. Athena squinted her snake eyes and pursed her lips into a smile. However, you're right. Once you've been taken into the underworld that this concubine is in charge of, and even your soul has become this concubine's possession, this concubine will then slowly unravel the mystery surrounding you. Athena stared straight at Noah as she said that. Her eyes shone as if she could see through all the secrets of a person's body, including the secret of why you haven't used your authority until now, but you still have the power to fight against God. Athena's words made Noah's heart skip a beat. This goddess, she can even see through Noah's inability to use his power until now? You actually didn't use your full strength against me, your fated enemy. I originally wanted to teach you a lesson. Athena stared at Noah and said, but, at this point in the battle, I can see that it's not that you don't want to use your authority, but that for some reason you can't use your authority. So I'll forgive you. After saying that, Athena suddenly sneered. However, don't think that I will show mercy because of this. You are my fated enemy. Next, you will receive an attack that I will use all of my divine power to launch. As soon as she finished speaking, dense darkness swept out from Athena's body like a storm and soon occupied half of the entire temple. Seeing this, Noah's eyes narrowed. Under such circumstances, Athena raised the shield in her hand. At some unknown time, the shield had suddenly transformed into a powerful bow. Athena raised the bow and stared in Noah's direction. She reached out and slowly pulled the bowstring. Wang! Suddenly, the darkness that filled the sky began to gather rapidly and condensed into Athena's slowly pulled bowstring. Not long after, a pitch-black arrow appeared on the bowstring. Moreover, the monstrous curse power and darkness were constantly instilled into the pitch-black arrow, causing the temperature between heaven and earth to plummet. As the powerful curse power and darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow one after another, Athena's face gradually turned pale. Obviously, Athena wasn't joking around. This goddess really intended to use all of her curse power to launch the final attack. Huff! Looking at the darkness that seemed to be rushing towards Athena and condensing into the pitch-black arrow, Noah let out a deep breath. Noah could clearly feel it. As more and more curse power and darkness condensed into the arrow gradually began to emit extremely terrifying waves of death. Under the enhancement of the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, Athena's power surpassed that of the Great Sage. Athena's attack with all of her curse power was definitely several times more terrifying than Susanu's attack. Therefore, the next attack would also determine the outcome of the battle. Noah's ill-fated relationship with Athena would be broken after this attack. In that case, if I don't use my strongest attack, then I don't deserve to be Athena's fated enemy, right? Noah laughed bitterly, but the expression in his eyes became extremely bright. Then there's no other way. The silver holy sword in Noah's hand shattered and turned into fragments that filled the sky. Among the fragments that filled the sky, a wave-like golden ripple rippled and slowly spat out a strange-shaped sword. Noah gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. Almost in an instant, the strangely shaped sword suddenly began to spin. Upon closer inspection, the sword that suddenly rotated was not only cylindrical, but it was also made up of 3 different cylindrical blades that were linked together. At this moment, the pitch-black cylindrical blades covered with red curse patterns spun in different directions at an extremely fast speed. Waves of red wind pressure like a storm rose from the cylindrical rotating blade. Chapter 1474. Wang. The extremely dense darkness continued to surge within the temple, as if a black ocean was rolling and gathering towards a black arrow. However, Athena, who was knocking the arrow, had a serious expression on her face. Amidst the violent whistling sound, Waves after waves of red wind pressure rose from the cylindrical sword like a whirlwind that continuously spiraled. Holding the cylindrical sword tightly, Noah looked like he was going to insert the spinning sword into the ground. He turned the sword upside down in front of him, the tip of the sword pointed to the ground, then he met Athena's gaze. The corner of his mouth slowly raised into a rather cold arc. "You want to defeat me, goddess?" Noah's voice was extremely clear amidst the violent red wind pressure. "Then let's try. Let me see if the goddess of the Holy Trinity, Athena, can break through the power of this sword." As he spoke, Noah converted all the energy in his body into magic power, causing the vast magic power to surge into the noble artifact named Guile Separation Sword. Amidst the influx of magic power, the 3 cylindrical blades on Guile Separation Sword spun faster and faster. In the end, it even let out an extremely sharp and ear-piercing sound. Amidst the sharp and ear-piercing sound, the violent red wind pressure on the Guile Separation Sword became more and more intense. It had already turned into a whirlwind and covered Noah's entire body. That scene was as if Noah had become the eye of a typhoon, causing the whirlwind to madly revolve around him. However, that wind was no ordinary wind. The best evidence was that anything that was swept by the red wind pressure, be it the ground, rocks, or debris, they were all like the most fragile pieces of paper and were cleanly crushed. In the end, the only place that remained intact was the ground that Noah was standing on. From that red wind pressure, Athena felt an extremely fatal threat. That threat was even more terrifying than the death that could be directly inflicted. The wisdom of the goddess of wisdom informed Athena. That wind pressure was absolutely untouchable. However, looking at Noah, who seemed to have become the center of the violent red wind pressure, and was controlling the red hurricane, Athena could clearly sense the scorching battle intent in his eyes. Her heart was boiling with excitement all of a sudden. "I see. Is this your real challenge to the goddess?" Driven by her boiling emotions, Athena couldn't help but shout loudly. "Good. Very good. This concubine's fated enemy. Your challenge. As the queen of the gods, Athena shall accept the challenge." It was as if he was displaying his final glory. Athena raised all the curse power in her body and squandered it like it was free. Suddenly, the enormous power of the curse and the dense darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow in an even more violent form, causing the entire world to tremble slightly and space to distort. After an unknown amount of time, the darkness and curse power that permeated the whole space slowly subsided. On the bowstring in Athena's hand, the pitch-black arrow bloomed with an extremely deep black light, causing the surrounding air to be annihilated and squeezed into nothingness little by little. The world suddenly became silent. Boom! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the pitch-black arrow turned into a huge light arrow that was hundreds of feet long and suddenly shot out. Wherever the light arrow passed, the ground seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force, causing a huge gully to be torn open and plowed the whole temple into 2 halves. The speed of the light arrow was so astonishing that people could only see a flash of light in front of their eyes. Even the sound of it breaking through the air could not be heard. The light arrow, which seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun, heavily landed on the red hurricane amidst the tremors of the world. Boom! When the pitch-black arrow, which seemed to carry the darkness of the night sky, landed on the red hurricane, a thunder-like explosion resounded in every space of the entire invisible island. The deafening noise exploded in the temple, causing the whole temple to tremble and suddenly crack open. Then an extremely terrifying impact, like an erupting volcano, turned into a strong wave of fire and spread out in an arc. At that moment, the few remaining pillars in the divine hall shattered one after another. The ground caved in layer by layer. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Under such a terrifying impact, even Athena could only raise her longbow and block in front of her. She tried her best to stabilize her body, but her eyes were fixed in front of her. There, the pitch-black arrows of light that blotted out the sky and the red hurricane collided with each other, setting off terrifying shockwaves that spread out in all directions. Looking at this scene, Athena's face sank bit by bit. This was because the attack, which had exhausted all of Athena's divine power, was in a deadlock with the red hurricane. It was completely unable to break through the barrier of the hurricane and touch Noah, who was inside. Within the red hurricane, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Athena, whose face had sunk. His eyes flashed and he suddenly grasped the hilt of the good parting sword, Pung! The good parting sword, which was spinning at an extreme speed, suddenly trembled and caused the red hurricane to explode. As a result, the arrow of light that collided with the red hurricane was directly swallowed by the sudden expansion of the hurricane. It was ruthlessly crushed and annihilated into nothingness. WH? Athena stood up in shock. Is this your full strength? Noah laughed out loud. Then it's my turn. As he said this, Noah suddenly raised the good parting sword in front of him and stabbed it in Athena's direction. Heaven and earth parting star, Enuma Elish. The violent red wind pressure that engulfed Noah's body suddenly turned into a terrifying tornado that swept out violently. The red tornado tore open the ground, tore open the temple, and tore open the entire space. It carried a huge pitch-black spatial fissure, and like a divine dragon, it swept towards Athena's direction with lightning speed. A terrifying wave of destruction frantically spread out from the pitch-black spatial fissure. Looking at the huge spatial fissure, as if it had cut open the heavens and earth layer by layer, and the mythical scene of the creation of the heavens and earth, Athena's beautiful snake eyes trembled violently. Her divine power had been exhausted. Her body stiffened. Her mind was blank. Her heart was wailing frantically. Athena could only watch as the red hurricane that tore the heavens and earth apart violently swept towards her with the pitch-black spatial fissure. Finally, as if she had seen through life and death, her eyes returned to indifference. Just like that, the red wind pressure engulfed Athena. Rumble! In the dark moonlit night on the terrifying rocky island, the red hurricane burst out from the temple in the center, tore open the entire temple, and penetrated through one end of the temple. The red hurricane turned into the most terrifying tornado in the world. It tore open the space, split the earth, and tore the entire invisible island into two halves. Then it separated the sea and swept into the distance. This process caused a pitch-black spatial fissure that seemed to have existed since ancient times to appear between heaven and earth. It was as if a small part of the world had been cut open, spanning across the entire invisible island. At the edge of the invisible island, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kira, who were fighting against a group of dead people, were trying their best to stabilize themselves because the island had been split in half and was shaking violently. Then, looking at the pitch-black spatial fissure that spanned across the entire island as if it had opened up the heavens and earth, the girls' eyes were filled with shock and horror. The dizzy dead people suddenly looked up at the sky and roared. Then they turned into dust and dissipated with the wind. Seeing this scene, the group of young girls understood. The outcome had been decided. Chapter 1475. In the pitch-black moonlight, the spatial fault that opened up the sky and the earth was like the Milky Way, hanging high above the seaside. That inconceivable scene immediately attracted the attention of many attentive people. Yarek, who was monitoring Lancelot's situation, looked at the mythical scene. Although his expression did not change, his palms were involuntarily clenched into fists, and his palms were already covered in sweat. That guy, how did he do it? Beside Yarek, who was pretending to be calm, Alice, who was monitoring Yarek in the form of a spirit body, was also shocked. She looked absent-mindedly at the scene that seemed to split the sky and earth, and did not recover for a long time. In the sky filled with dark clouds, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Lancelot, who was riding on the back of a handsome white horse, his whole body was enduring the violent lightning strikes. He was accumulating his strength as he stared at the mythical scene by the seaside with an almost inconceivable eyesight, and muttered to himself, "Is this the true power of that man?" As he said this, Lancelot's whole body was slightly trembling. It was not because of fear. It was because of excitement. Even if it was me now, I would probably be reduced to ashes under such a blow. It's really scary, but the more I know, the more I want to fight that king who killed the god. As the purest, most original, and most refined steel, the battle thirst in Lancelot's heart was something that others could not compare to. Even if he knew that the enemy's power could defeat him without any ability to fight back, the more it was so, the more the purest steel hero wanted to challenge him. Weren't the so-called heroes such existences? Just like those heroes who went on a crusade against monsters that harmed the human world, or even those who challenged dragons. Even if they knew that their opponent was a monster, a dragon, a powerful and terrifying creature that humans could not compare to, they would still face it head-on. Just to be able to find a trace of possibility in the impossible, to defeat the enemy, and achieve great things. Therefore, when Lancelot witnessed the scene that split the sky and earth apart with his own eyes, what he felt was not fear, but excitement and excitement. I really want to fight him. Unfortunately, this wish could not be realized at the moment. It seems that even the queen of the god realm was unable to defeat that terrifying god slayer. Guinevere appeared beside Lancelot without anyone noticing. Fear first appeared in his eyes, but it was soon replaced by determination. However, if that's the case, our plan can be realized. Hearing Guinevere's words, Lancelot sobered up a little. He forced himself to regain his rationality that was almost swallowed by the arrogance of the god of disobedience and nodded. We originally wanted to join forces with Athena to challenge the powerful godslayer. But Athena was unbelievably obsessed with the godslayer, so we chose to watch from the sidelines. Yes, uncle. Guinevere nodded heavily. After all, no matter who wins between Lord Noah and Lady Athena, it is a good thing for us. After learning that it was impossible to form an alliance with Athena, Guinevere immediately had a discussion with Lancelot, who was recovering his strength. In the end, both of them decided not to interfere in the battle between Noah and Athena. This was because this battle was, in fact, a rare opportunity for Guinevere and Lancelot. If Athena were to emerge victorious in this battle and kill Noah, it would naturally be the best thing for Guinevere and Lancelot, who viewed Noah as an unprecedentedly powerful enemy. However, if Noah won this battle, Guinevere and Lancelot would proceed with the next step of their plan. As the highest-level goddess of Earth, the power of the draconic serpent in Athena's body can greatly stimulate the existence of steel. Guinevere finally revealed his plan. If Lord Athena is defeated by Lord Noah, then the goddess of Earth, who is on the brink of death, will definitely channel the undying power of the draconic serpent to the greatest extent and fill this land with the essence of the earth. Guinevere closed his eyes and said, as if he could feel the essence of the goddess of Earth gradually filling the land. If our master is sleeping on this island, then, stimulated by the essence of the dying snake goddess, even if he does not wake up, there will be some reaction and release a little divine aura. At that time, my beloved daughter will be able to use the power of the divine ancestor to activate the power of the spirit vision. With the help of our master's connection, we will be able to find him. Lancelot said lightly. For this, we even planned that if the person who killed the god was defeated by the queen of the heavenly realm, then we would kill the goddess of Earth. Now it seems that there is no need for that. This was the reason why Guinevere and Lancelot chose to watch this battle. Susanu had also said that the power of the draconic serpent would stimulate the sleeping steel, so they needed to summon the great sage to eliminate the draconic serpent. Now, Guinevere and Lancelot planned to use this point to find the traces of the strongest steel that was sleeping on this land. But, my beloved daughter, even with the stimulation of the dying goddess of Earth's draconic serpent, the success rate of finding our master is very low. Lancelot pointed out the biggest flaw of this plan. After all, even if you are a god ancestor and have the powerful power of the spirit vision, the power of the spirit vision is not something that can be actively activated. Our failure rate is very high. Please don't worry about this, uncle, Guinevere said without any confusion. Guinevere used to be the goddess of Earth. This sentence caused Lancelot to speak in surprise. My beloved daughter, are you going to undo the seal of the draconic serpent? The former goddess of Earth gave up her immortal life, and then fell into depravity. The existence that appeared after that was the god ancestor. In other words, the god ancestor was the former goddess of Earth. In the body of such god ancestor, there was a draconic serpent seal. As long as the draconic serpent seal was undone, the god ancestor would take back the divinity, and divine power that she had when she was the goddess of Earth, and fight against the god slayer and the god of disobedience. However, once this seal was undone, the immortal life of the god ancestor would also disappear in a short time. In other words, Guinevere was ready to give up her life in exchange for power. If we can stimulate the draconic serpent power of another goddess of Earth, more of our master's divine aura will leak out, increasing the success rate of the spirit vision. Guinevere, who is the incarnation of the goddess of Earth, can also use a more powerful spiritual eye to spy, increasing the success rate of finding our master. Guinevere turned her head and looked at Lancelot's hand. In addition, Uncle still has the remains of our master in his hands. Through it, Guinevere will be able to find the location of our master, who is connected to her divine aura, and awaken our sleeping master. Taking a closer look. In Lancelot's hand was a gun. It was a very ordinary gun. However, the tip of this very ordinary spear was a platinum-colored sharp blade. The sharp blade emitted an extremely dazzling light, exuding an extremely sharp aura. At first glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary weapon. Once, in order to awaken the last king, the previous generation of Guinevere fabricated the legend of King Arthur. That was to say, King Arthur's original form was the last king in this world. In the legends of Great Britain, the most famous symbol of King Arthur was undoubtedly the sword of Steelbreaker, which was known as the King's Sword. Since King Arthur's original form was the last king, it meant that the existence known as the last king also had a steel blade that symbolized himself. The Sword of Steel was the most powerful god relic that was integrated with the last king. It was the trump card that Wang Zhangji used to annihilate the god-slaying demon king. Every time the last king annihilated all the godslayers on the earth and fell into a deep sleep again, the remains of the sword would be left on the land where it had once roamed. Guinevere found such remains and awakened it with a secret method, creating a replica of the sword and transforming it into a gun for Lancelot to use. Chapter 1476. Clang! The platinum blade that was made into the tip of the spear shone with a dazzling light. It was a kind of blade light that could easily make people feel intoxicated. Looking at the platinum spear tip that Lancelot held tightly in his hand, Guinevere caressed it lovingly. The sword of swords, the steel of steel, the divine sword that can even cut a star. It's called the divine sword of salvation. If the hero known as the last king was King Arthur's original form, the sharp blade called the divine sword of salvation was the original form of the divine sword of salvation. It was just like what Guinevere said. It was the divine sword of salvation that could even cut a star and kill the demon king who killed a god in one hit. It was extremely powerful. One of the most important reasons why the existence known as the last king could become the nemesis of the demon king, who killed gods, was that he possessed the most powerful god relic that was integrated with his body. It was equivalent to a clone of himself. Now, the tip of the divine spear that Lancelot was holding was only a defective replica made from the remains of the divine saber. Not only did it not have the terrifying power of the real divine sword of salvation, but it could only be used for a limited time. There were even conditions to use it. However, even so, it still had enough power to be Lancelot's trump card. The reason why someone as astute as Yarek had miscalculated Lancelot's strength and was heavily injured by Lancelot was largely due to the existence of this divine spear. One could only imagine how powerful the true divine blade of salvation was. Naturally, Guinevere did not use the secret method to replicate the spear just to make it Lancelot's weapon. The divine sword of salvation was a god relic that was integrated with the hero who saved the world. Meanwhile, the tip of the spear in Lancelot's hand was made from the remnant of the divine sword of salvation. In other words, the tip of the spear could be regarded as a part of the last king's body. If the last king sleeping in this land was stimulated by the power of the two goddess of earth's dragons and snakes, then the last king sleeping in this land would have a reaction and leak some divine energy. Then, through the wreckage of the sword of salvation connected to the main body's divine energy, the possibility of finding the location of the last king would be very high with the help of the goddess of earth's spiritual eye, which was far superior to the spirit vision. For this reason, Guinevere did not hesitate to undo the seal of the dragon snake. Pa-ji. In an instant, the sound of something breaking rang out. The doll-like girl's body surged with a shocking amount of curse power. Even her body began to rapidly expand. Kaha. White and silver scales began to form on Guinevere's skin like ice. Bang! The girl's black dress, which looked like a morning dress, instantly exploded. Just like that, Guinevere's entire body began to distort. Sharp claws grew out of the front ends of his limbs, and wings grew out of his back. His pitiful face turned into a cold and sharp reptilian face, but there was a sense of solemnity on his face. In that instant, Guinevere transformed into a white dragon. It was a dragon with the body of a snake, like a divine dragon, but with a pair of enormous wings. Wang! The boundless aura of Mother Earth began to spread throughout the heaven and earth. Because Athena was on the verge of death, this world was already filled with the power of dragons and serpents. Now, coupled with the aura of the Mother Earth goddess that Guinevere had transformed into, invisible waves that could not be seen directly by the naked eye suddenly expanded in this world. Clang! As if stimulated by the abundant power of dragons and serpents, the tip of the divine spear in Lancelot's hand bloomed with a more dazzling white light than before. In the white light, Guinevere's pair of snake-like eyes flashed. Although the ability known as spirit vision was only a kind of apocalypse, sometimes it could even see the future. Now Guinevere, who had transformed into the Mother Earth goddess, relied on the spiritual eye that was purer than spirit vision to see through the remains of the divine blade of salvation. His entire mind followed the aura of the divine blade of salvation and expanded into this world. His purpose was to search for the aura of the steel hero that rose from the remains of the divine blade of salvation after being stimulated by the aura of dragons and serpents. Not long after, Guinevere's mind was suddenly pulled to a dark place. There, Guinevere saw the scene of his dreams. This made Guinevere pleasantly surprised, and he even shouted out loud, "Uncle! I found it!" At the same time, on the invisible island that was split in half by the spatial fault that separated heaven and earth, the mythical impact gradually began to subside. Without knowing when, the darkness that covered this part of the world began to fade, allowing the stars and the full moon in the sky to suddenly appear, sprinkling a soft light. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping away all the thick sand and dust that filled the center of the invisible island. As the smoke and dust dissipated, the huge temple was exposed under the moonlight. However, the temple, which was exposed under the moonlight, was in a horrible state. Large and small cracks covered the surrounding ground and walls. Stone pillars fell to the ground, either half destroyed or completely destroyed. Pieces of rubble and debris filled every corner of the building. In addition, there was a huge deep pit located in the center of the temple, like the crater of a volcano, emitting bursts of scorched smoke and a smell. As for the ceiling, it had completely disappeared, leaving only a few pieces of it. The originally vast and towering temple seemed to have been shaken by an earthquake. Nearly half of it had collapsed and directly turned into ruins. The scene made one begin to wonder if the temple ruins had been in such a state from the beginning, instead of being destroyed in less than a few minutes. Unfortunately, this was the truth. The temple that was exposed under the moonlight with a tragic appearance was destroyed in less than a few minutes. Moreover, in the temple, there was a dark spatial fault that looked like a ferocious gap that spanned across. That kind of scene was simply something that could only be found in myths. Buzz! In the slight vibration, the cylindrical rotating blade that was previously spinning at an extremely fast speed slowly stopped, allowing the red wind pressure that lingered around the blade to dissipate. Holding the relic called the obedient separation sword, Noah looked in front of him speechlessly. There, the goddess who was known for her beauty and wisdom sat on the ground, her whole body intact, without a trace of injury. However, this goddess was no longer the same as before. Her whole body was fluctuating with terrifying divine power. Because of the exhaustion of her power, her body shrank from the form of a 17 or 18-year-old girl to the form of a 12 or 13-year-old girl. She clutched her chest, her face pale and tired. Seeing this, Noah was silent for a while, then sighed. As expected of the goddess who symbolizes immortality, even if the curse power in her body is exhausted, she can still be resurrected? Yes. Under the direct attack of the obedient separation sword, Athena had long been smashed to pieces, leaving no trace behind. However, after that, Athena immediately came back to life. This was a very unbelievable thing. It must be known that once, Perseus was killed by Noah because his curse power was exhausted, and he could no longer use the power of resurrection. Now, Athena had also exhausted her curse power, but she could still come back to life. From this, it could be seen that the goddess of earth was immortal. In this regard, Athena, who was sitting on the ground, could only laugh at herself. This is the only time. I have exhausted all my power. You don't even need to use that terrifying sword. You only need to attack me again, and I will die in your hands. Athena's eyes were filled with satisfaction as she spoke. What a beautiful sword strike. You are this concubine's destined enemy. That sword strike buried this concubine, causing this concubine to lose a life. It also calmed the surging passion in this concubine's heart for you. To end with such an impeccable sword, even I have no reason to not be satisfied. Athena raised her head, looked at Noah and said word by word, "Give this concubine the final blow." Chapter 1477. Give this concubine the final blow. When Athena's words echoed in the surrounding space, the atmosphere of the entire world became heavy. Noah looked at Athena, who was sitting on the ground and clutching her chest. Her face was pale and exhausted, and his dark eyes flickered. In the end, Noah sighed and raised the parting sword above his head. Athena slowly closed her eyes. Just when Athena thought that Noah was going to give her the final blow, Noah raised the sword above his head and let it float in the air. A golden ripple suddenly appeared and swallowed the good separation sword, Then it disappeared from the space. After that, Noah stepped forward and knelt on one knee in front of Athena, who was paralyzed on the ground. Athena, who didn't receive the final blow, frowned slightly and opened her eyes, allowing Noah's figure to enter her vision. A pair of deep pitch-black eyes met with a pair of incomparably coquettish snake eyes, causing their gazes to converge. Athena did not avoid Noah's gaze. She frowned and said expressionlessly, "What? You don't want to kill me?" "That's not quite right." Noah didn't look away either. He stared straight into Athena's coquettish snake eyes. "I've just killed you," said Lin Yun. "But I resurrected." Athena retorted. "Then there's no point." "Why?" Noah asked indifferently. "I've already made a killing move with the intention of killing you and completely defeated you. I've already achieved my goal, so why do you say that it's meaningless?" "So you really don't want to kill me?" Athena frowned. "Why? Killing me will give you a new authority, right? Could it be that you've already forgotten what I said to you in Nabali last time?" Noah said with a chuckle. "My authority is enough for me to use. Even now, I still have the potential to greatly increase my power. One or two more authority won't be of much help to me." After saying that, Noah shrugged and said so. "Or do you think that after killing you, I'll be able to usurp a power that's more powerful than the Genesis attack just now?" Athena was suddenly speechless. Even as the goddess of wisdom, Athena did not dare to tell Noah that after killing her, he would be able to usurp an authority that was comparable to the power of the Good Departure Sword. The Good Departure Sword was an X-ranked relic. It was one of the strongest relics in Noah's treasury. Its power was definitely more than 99% of an authority. Since he had such power, one or two more authority wouldn't matter to Noah, right? "Moreover, I also have the Aegis," Noah said. "If after killing you the authority I usurp is the Aegis, then it's even more useless to me, right?" Athena, who was provoked by Noah's words, suddenly stared at Noah. "Then what do you want?" Hearing this, Noah curled his lips and smiled. "Isn't this obvious?" Saying this, Noah looked straight at Athena and extended a hand in her direction. "Fulfill the promise you made to me in Nabali and stay by my side." Athena's expression suddenly froze. Back then, when they were in Nabali, Noah and Athena did have an agreement. If in the future the winner was Athena, then Noah would be at Athena's disposal. If in the future the winner was Noah, then Athena would have to be like Lancelot and protect Noah forever as a guardian. Now Noah wanted Athena to fulfill the promise. This caused the light in Athena's eyes to sway slightly. After a while she suddenly smiled. A mere human actually wants to obtain Athena's body and mind. Don't you think that's too greedy? What does it matter? Noah said somewhat unhappily. I also spent a lot of effort to defeat the Trinity Queen of the heavenly realm. Is it wrong to be a little greedy? Humans are indeed a group of arrogant and ignorant people, even you are no exception. Athena said sarcastically, but there was not much disgust on her pretty face. Instead, there was an aloof smile. However, you're right. There's no reason for the man who defeated me to not even have the guts to ask for such a small amount of spoils. As the loser, I can only follow the rules of the battlefield and listen to the orders of the victor. After saying this, Athena extended a hand and placed it on Noah's hand. Whether it is in the past, present, or future, this is probably the only time I am willing to serve a human. Noah Dole, feel honored to be favored by Athena. Hearing the proud declaration of the goddess known for her beauty and wisdom, Noah could not help but smile. God and Godslayer. They were supposed to be enemies, But at this moment, they were holding each other's hands tightly. At this moment they had formed a lifelong bond and connection. At this moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. Kaboom! Along with the thunderous roar, the originally clear night sky was suddenly stirred up by the wind and clouds, completely disrupted. Noah and Athena both raised their heads and looked at the sky. Athena's pretty face immediately changed. Not good. Time rewound to a few minutes ago. This place was higher than the clouds, even far above the atmosphere. People called this area the orbit of the satellite, the domain of the universe. The environment here was very harsh. Depending on the sunlight, the temperature here would change from extreme cold to extreme heat. In this place, humans could not survive without the help of tools. However, in this high altitude that was connected to the universe, there was a small island. Yes, a small island. There were hills and flat land, but there were no plants or life. There was only soil and rocks on this small island. Such a small island was suspended high in the sky where no one could reach. In the center of this island on the ground, there was a sword inserted upside down. It was a steel sword with a blade length of nearly 100 centimeters, with both sides open. The blade on both sides was long and wide, and the structure was very thick. In terms of appearance alone, this sword was exactly the same as Noah's Excalibur. However, unlike the Excalibur that shone with a golden radiance, the sword in front of him was mottled with rust, and there was nothing that could attract his attention. However, in this world, this sword was the prototype of the Excalibur. It was called the Sword of Salvation. It was the strongest sword worn by the hero who annihilated the Demon King. Chi. At a certain moment, a bolt of lightning violently swept from the planet below and landed on the small island. Boom! Accompanied by a roar, the ground that was hit by the lightning suddenly burst open, and a thick cloud of smoke and dust rose. It didn't take long for the smoke and dust to slowly dissipate. Inside, two figures walked out. Looking at the mottled rusty steel sword, Guinevere, who had transformed into a white dragon, could not help but murmur with some excitement. "Master, Guinevere has finally found you." Compared to Guinevere, Lancelot seemed to be much more indifferent. "My beloved daughter, my master seems to be still lazy. While your life is still there, hurry and wake up the lazy master." "Got it, uncle." Only then did Guinevere suppress the excitement in his heart and circled his slender body around the steel sword. Hum! The mottled sword suddenly vibrated and suddenly bloomed with star-like light. Boom! At this moment, the wind and clouds suddenly surged in the world below, and thunder rumbled. Chapter 1478. Hum! A light as bright as the sun bloomed on the mottled and rusted steel sword, instantly filling the entire space. Guinevere, who had transformed into a white dragon, seemed to intend to use his body to support the shining steel sword. His body circled the space around the steel sword, while his head hung down from top to bottom, and a cute voice that was completely different from his appearance sounded. "We pray for the sword's rebirth, cut through the darkness of the apocalypse, and kill the demon king who slays the gods." The sacred voice resounded over the entire island, causing the divine sword of salvation to tremble repeatedly, and the brilliance that bloomed on it became more and more dazzling. "The incomparably noble sword of swords, the blade of blades, the steel of steel, you are the blade that annihilates the demon king. You are the pure white light of salvation, born to kill the Rakshasa of the world. Respond to the call of your former ally, and return to this world." Guinevere, who was chanting, suddenly opened his huge dragon mouth and spat out a bolt of lightning. The dazzling lightning suddenly struck the mottled and rusted steel sword, causing the platinum brilliance to tremble violently. Like a vortex of light, it converged into the divine sword of salvation. The light faded away. However, the steel sword that was inserted into the ground had completely changed. One could only see a dazzling arc of light slowly flowing on the platinum sword, causing the sharp blade to shine with a dazzling luster. The originally mottled and rusted steel sword no longer existed. In its place was a platinum divine sword that shone with a dazzling light, and the blade seemed to be the most dazzling weapon in the world. The sword was so dazzling that it made people involuntarily absent-minded. However, neither Guinevere nor Lancelot shifted their gaze to the platinum divine sword, but slightly shifted their gaze to the space near the divine sword. At some point in time, a silhouette had appeared there. It was a young man with pale white hair. The young man's back was facing Guinevere and Lancelot, so they couldn't see his appearance clearly, but his back revealed a sense of vicissitudes. He wore a very simple blue windbreaker and trousers, and a white coat that resembled a cape on the outside. The young man seemed to have been there since the beginning. He stood against the wind, with his back to Guinevere and Lancelot, standing beside the divine sword. Looking at the figure, Guinevere could no longer hide his excitement and shouted out loud, "Master, Guinevere has finally completed her mission and awakened you." Hearing this, the youth who was standing against the wind slowly raised his head and turned around, revealing his handsome face to the snake goddess and the steel hero. However, on that upright and beautiful face, there was an indelible weariness. While looking at the excited Guinevere, there was a trace of complicated emotions in his eyes. That gaze was as if he was looking at a meddlesome person. Even if it wasn't filled with disgust, there was still a heavy sense of sorrow. However, that gaze disappeared in an instant. "I never thought that I would be able to see you all again. This is great." The young man's voice actually contained a kind of gentle feeling that made people feel comfortable. At this moment, this voice only expressed the joy of reunion. In the past, the hero who was known as the Last King and had the mission to annihilate the Demon King had appeared several times, wandering the earth and conquering the god slayers. During this process, the hero met many like-minded gods of disobedience who had also appeared on the ground and wandered aimlessly. Among them was Lancelot, and also Guinevere when she was still the goddess of earth. Therefore, for the hero, Guinevere and Lancelot were old friends of the past. In this regard, Lancelot just nodded and said so. "I am also deeply happy to be able to fight side by side with you again." And because Guinevere gave up her immortal life and fell to become a god ancestor, now she had long lost the memories of fighting side by side with the hero, and only respect and love for the master she was pursuing. Now that you have awakened, Guinevere's existence is meaningful. For a long time, Guinevere had been pursuing the Last King, using the identity of the Last King's servant to disturb the order of the world. Her goal was to awaken the Last King, whom she called her master. Now this goal was finally achieved. Then, Guinevere's existence was meaningful. Understanding this, the hero looked at Guinevere, who had turned into a white dragon, with eyes full of sorrow. "Your life is almost at its end, right?" "Yes, master," Guinevere said in a pious tone. "So please let Guinevere use this life that is about to fade away to replace the lost Holy Grail, so that you can recover completely." In the past, every time the hero completed the mission to annihilate all the demon kings on the earth, this hero would fall into a deep sleep, silently waiting for the birth of a new demon king, and the battle would repeat over and over again. In the long sleep, the hero would gradually lose his power, and when he woke up, he would be in a state where he had no power at all. Because of this, every time he woke up, the hero had to wander the earth. It was said before that the hero of steel was the natural enemy of the goddess of snakes, born with the power to slay dragons and kill snakes. And the goddess of snakes was the goddess of earth. Because of this, the hero of steel was able to extract essence from the earth. For example, the great sage, Heaven's Equal, had once merged with a mountain to extract the essence of the earth to recover from his injuries. The hero, as the strongest hero of steel, had an unparalleled authority in this aspect. He did not need to painstakingly extract the essence of the earth like the great sage, spending a few days to gather enough energy to recover from his injuries. The hero only needed to step on the earth, and his body would naturally extract the essence of the earth. Moreover, the speed was extremely fast. Therefore, the hero had to wander the earth because he needed to gather the essence of the earth to recover his lost power. In order to restore the hero to a perfect state after he woke up, Guinevere did not hesitate to sacrifice his immortal life to create the Holy Grail. The function of the Holy Grail was to store the essence of the earth. With the help of the Holy Grail, the hero would be able to recover immediately after he woke up. However, now that the Holy Grail had been taken away by Noah, there was no way to use this function. Therefore, what Guinevere could do was to transform the life of the Gaia goddess, which was about to disappear, into pure essence of the earth to restore the hero to a perfect state. This way, Master can destroy that terrifying god slayer. Guinevere looked at the hero with a trace of nostalgia. Then, without any hesitation, he controlled his white dragon-like body and flew into the air. Bang! In the next second, Guinevere's huge body exploded. This god ancestor who had repeatedly schemed against Noah and caused him a lot of trouble in the dark had finally died. However, the body of this god ancestor did not turn into minced meat or blood. Instead, it turned into a golden mist that poured down and sprinkled on the body of the last king. The body of the hero, who was known as the last king, naturally absorbed the golden mist that sprinkled down. Then a huge spell began to slowly rise from the hero's body. Finally, it turned into a violent storm that blew across the entire island. In the storm, a figure gradually appeared. It was a strange man with bandages all over his body and a mask on his face. The strange man appeared from the raging storm and landed next to the hero. The hero looked at the strange man as if he was looking at a close friend. He smiled with a sad expression. "It's good that you're here." After this short sentence, the hero didn't say anything else. The reason was simple. Before Lancelot had even appeared on the ground, this strange man with bandages all over his body had already been by Hero's side, working for him. The hero trusted this god even more than Lancelot. "My lord, it's time to conquer the enemy," Lancelot suddenly said. "There is an extremely powerful god slayer in the lower realm who is waiting for your arrival." The hero silently lowered his head and did not speak. However, he reached out his hand and slowly grasped the platinum divine blade. The hero who annihilated the Demon King had finally arrived. Chapter 1479. Rumble. Under the dark night, the entire sky surged as if it was welcoming the most terrifying storm. Lightning flashed and thunder roared back and forth between the dark clouds, and the storm was getting more and more intense. At this moment, the sky seemed to be constantly stirred by an invisible hand. The dark clouds rotated like a vortex, causing the air to become chaotic. This scene could be best described as a change in heaven and earth. Looking at the chaotic sky, both Noah and Athena felt an extremely unusual sense of oppression. It was the precursor of a storm. "What's going on?" Noah said with some surprise. "Could it be that Lancelot and Guinevere are up to something again?" "No, it's not." Athena shook her head and murmured with a dignified expression. "It's that man. That man finally woke up." "That man." Noah was startled at first, then his heart skipped a beat. "The last king?" Athena nodded her head in silence, but her expression was somewhat displeased. "Looks like that servant girl used some kind of method to find the place where that man was hibernating and woke him up. This concubine originally thought that they would come and disturb the duel between you and me, so I specially made some arrangements. Who would have thought that the servant girl would wake up that taboo steel?" Like Noah, Athena also made some countermeasures to prevent Guinevere and Lancelot from disrupting the duel. No wonder she was called the goddess of wisdom. It was a pity that Guinevere and Lancelot only wanted to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight while reaping the benefits. They did not disturb the duel halfway. Otherwise, with Noah and Athena's arrangements, the two god ancestors and the hero would really be in trouble. However, it was a little too late to say this now. Guinevere and Lancelot did not come personally to disrupt the duel, but used some unorthodox methods to find the location of the last king. After understanding this, Noah opened his mouth slightly. Just as he was about to ask something, Athena suddenly raised her head and yelled, "You're going to kill me! They're here!" Almost as soon as Athena's voice trailed off, a bolt of lightning shot down from the disorderly clouds in the sky. It tore through the sky and bombarded the top of the half-destroyed temple. Bang! The lightning struck the ceiling of the temple, causing a loud boom and a burst of electric arcs. It even set off a strong wind that blew in all directions. Noah and Athena subconsciously raised their hands in front of their faces to block the violent wind. Then they quickly raised their eyes and looked at the top of the temple. There 3 people appeared. One was an armored hero riding on a handsome white horse. One of them was a strange man with bandages all over his body and a mask on his face. The other young man stood between the armored hero and the masked man. His windbreaker fluttered in the wind, and he held a platinum blade tightly in his hand. Both Noah and Athena's eyes trembled. Without any hesitation, they looked directly at the young man holding the platinum blade. Then, under the gaze of Noah and Athena, the young man's windbreaker fluttered in the wind, and an extremely terrifying fluctuation of cursed power surged from his body. The space trembled in an instant. The terrifying curse power transformed into a substantial flame that burned on the young man's body. In the blink of an eye, he had surpassed Lancelot and the masked eccentric man. Moreover, it was still rising at an extremely fast speed. Feeling the terrifying curse power, Noah's pupils suddenly shrank, and he exclaimed, "No, no way." Noah couldn't help but be surprised. In this world, Noah could be considered to have encountered many powerful disobedient gods. Among them, there was no lack of gods like Welslana, Mercato, Perseus, Sisanu, the Monkey King, and Athena, who were the highest-ranking gods among the gods. Among these gods, if Noah had to pick the most powerful one, it would undoubtedly be Athena, who had been strengthened by the Dark Night and the Invisible Island. After being strengthened by the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, Athena's power had surpassed the rest of the highest-ranking disobedient gods in all aspects. Therefore, in the face of Athena's attack, Noah had to use the strongest X-level relic. Of course, in terms of power alone, Athena was not the strongest among the disobedient gods that Noah had encountered. After all, the great sage, Heaven's equal, had once used the blessing of the ancient covenant to gain a great increase in power when facing multiple god slayers. He had suddenly surpassed all the disobedient gods and reached the top 4 digits of the box court. If it was the Monkey King who had used the power of the ancient covenant, then even Athena, who had been strengthened by the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, would be weaker. However, at this moment, the power of the boy with the platinum blade had easily surpassed all the above gods. If Athena's power, which had been strengthened by the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, was 10, and the Monkey King's power, which had been strengthened by the ancient covenant, was 30, then the boy's power had broken through 70, 80, and even 90, and finally broke through the 100 barrier. And that was not the limit. The young man's power was still rising. The Monkey King's power, which had been strengthened by the ancient covenant, was comparable to the 4-digit level of the top gods. Therefore, the boy who had surpassed the Monkey King by several times, or even dozens of times, had undoubtedly reached the 3-digit level. Impressively, he was no weaker than Aziz Dakaha. How could Noah not be surprised? The boy slowly raised the platinum blade in his hand under Noah's astonished gaze. Clang! In an instant, a brilliant platinum brilliance rose from the blade, illuminating the entire night. Then, pointing high into the sky, on the tip of the divine blade, which was blooming with brilliant light, a platinum ball of light slowly rotated in the distant sky, condensing and blooming with brilliant light. As the platinum ball of light grew bigger, the light from it grew stronger and stronger. Finally, it was as bright as the sun, making the whole night as bright as day. Seeing such a scene, Noah's heart was filled with a sense of alarm. Under such circumstances, the young man who was holding the dazzling platinum blade did not say a word. He just looked down at Noah condescendingly. There was no joy or sorrow in his eyes, only intense fatigue and numbness. Then, in front of Noah, the young man swung the divine saber in his hand heavily. In the sky, the white gold sun suddenly trembled and fell straight down. It rubbed against the air and stirred up a wave of fiery red heat. With a speed that was not inferior to lightning, it fell from the sky and abruptly landed on the invisible island. Boom! An earth-shattering noise resounded through the sky. The platinum sun directly hit the island above the ocean, and it exploded, causing the Banshee Island that originally only existed in myths to be shrouded in the explosion in an instant. In the flash of the explosion, the ground of the invisible island was destroyed inch by inch. The trees were shattered one by one, and the rocks and debris were annihilated little by little. Everything seemed to have been melted by the scorching heat, disappearing without a trace. Boom! With the invisible island as the center, a circle of terrifying shock waves spread out in a ring shape, setting off a layer of tsunami-like waves. Together with the shock waves, it surged out in all directions. That scene was as if a small star had really hit the ocean, causing a terrifying commotion. No one knew how long that apocalyptic scene lasted, and no one would calculate how long it lasted. However, when the terrifying shockwave and explosive flashes gradually subsided, the famous island of the snake-haired demoness Medusa had long since disappeared. What was left was only a strait to the bottom of the sea, where one could vaguely see the surface of the sea. There a deep pit was dug out, as if a meteorite had penetrated the earth and led to the earth's core. It was bottomless. Chapter 1480. Whoosh! In the loud sound of a waterfall falling vertically in the ocean, a large amount of seawater followed the natural law of flowing downwards and poured into the deep pit that seemed to lead straight to the core of the earth, forming a rather peculiar sea scene. The hero holding the blade of salvation, the knight riding on the white horse, and the strange man in the whirlwind were all suspended in mid-air, looking down at the strange sea scene below without any fluctuations in their eyes. After all, the same scene had been seen many times in previous expeditions, so it was not surprising at all. As expected of the real blade of salvation, its power is indeed unparalleled. Lancelot only raised the divine spear in his hand with some admiration and some regret. In front of the real power of the blade of salvation, such a replica is not worth mentioning. As Lancelot's words sounded, the brilliance on the tip of the divine spear in his hand became extremely dim, and even began to become mottled and rusty. After all, a replica was just a replica. Under the real power of the blade of salvation, the tip of the divine spear in Lancelot's hand seemed to feel inferior and lost its brilliance little by little, and silently collapsed, turning into powder and dissipating along with the body of the spear. In front of the real thing, the replica could only be reduced to the result of dejectedly leaving the scene. However, it was originally used as a medium to find the last king. Therefore, Lancelot did not feel pity for the divine spear at all, but said with some regret, "At first, I wanted to use this spear to fight against the abnormally powerful god-slayer. But now it seems that I can't fulfill this small wish." The divine spear had died of old age. The god-slayer, who was regarded as a great enemy by Guinevere and Lancelot, was also eliminated under the brilliance of the blade of salvation. Lancelot's heart that was eager to fight Noah could only helplessly calm down. However, at this time the hero shook his head. "No, the god-slayer is not dead yet. I can feel that the power in my body is not declining, which proves that the number of god-slayers in the world today has not decreased." "Oh!" Lancelot was surprised at first, but then he said in amazement, "To be able to survive under the direct attack of the blade of salvation, as expected of the demon king who repeatedly forced me and my beloved daughter into a desperate situation. The so-called god-slayer is such a person. No matter how unfavorable the situation is, he can find a good opportunity to win. No matter how dangerous the situation is, he can find a way to survive." The hero praised in a sincere tone. An existence capable of killing gods as a human, how could such a level cause them to lose their lives? If that's the case, isn't the hero who has destroyed so many god-slayers since ancient times to the present? Lancelot suddenly smiled. "I also admire your martial prowess. That's why I joined you and served you as my master." Hearing this, the hero didn't show any pride or joy on his face. Instead, he revealed a sad expression. Seeing this, Lancelot. After a while, the knight on his horse spoke with a tone. Are you really tired of fighting?" Lancelot's words made the hero who annihilated the demon king smile tiredly. "Yes, tired." The hero, who was given the mission of annihilating the demon king by the gods, had long been tired of the repeated slumber and awakening. Once he woke up, he would have to fight. Therefore, after being awakened by Guinevere, the hero looked at the god ancestor as if he was a busybody. If it wasn't because he was tired of fighting, why would this hero, who would awaken every time multiple godslayers appeared in the world, still be in a deep slumber when there were 7 godslayers in the world? If the hero really wanted to fight, he would have woken up at a much earlier time. Why would he need Guinevere's busybody to wake him up? However, this matter was very inconceivable. The so-called steel was a living god of sword, god of war, and god of war. The purer the steel was, the more he yearned for fierce battles. The hero, who was the strongest steel, was actually tired of fighting. It was really inconceivable. Therefore, Guinevere did not think that the hero was still in a deep slumber because he did not want to wake up. It was not because he had not yet awakened and needed her to wake up the last king. However, Lancelot could easily see through his master's inner thoughts. Lancelot even knew why the steel, who was supposed to be extremely battle-thirsty, would be so inconceivably tired of fighting. Thinking of this, Lancelot raised his eyes slightly and looked behind the hero. Upon closer inspection, there was an extremely difficult to detect black shadow hovering there like a whirlpool. Glancing at the black shadow, Lancelot said helplessly, "If that's the case, you won't take the initiative to chase after the Godslayer, right?" "No." The hero shook his head and his tone became unusually firm. Although I am tired of the constant battles since I have woken up, I have to fight the God Slayer to determine the winner. Saying this, the hero turned his head and looked in the direction of the land with a sorrowful gaze. Otherwise, this world will be destroyed because of me. As far as the hero's eyes could see, on the shore closest to the ocean, a strange phenomenon suddenly occurred. It was as if the earth had suddenly lost its moisture and slowly dried up. All the flowers and plants turned yellow. The trees became dry and withered bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, as far as the hero's eyes could see, the earth became lifeless and the area was constantly expanding. If this continued, sooner or later the entire island and even the entire world would become a barren land of death. Understanding this, the existence known as the last king to appear in the apocalypse smiled sadly. That's right, I must kill those God-slayers and go back to sleep as soon as possible. Lancelot and the masked man suddenly became silent. An oppressive atmosphere pervaded the entire world. At the same time, on the outskirts of the city some distance away from the sea, a pitch-black swamp-like darkness suddenly appeared. In the darkness, Noah and Athena stumbled out of the darkness. Ugh! As soon as they appeared, Athena immediately covered her chest and fell to the ground with a painful expression. Noah was shocked and quickly went forward, hugged Athena, and knelt on the ground with one knee. Are you okay? Hearing Noah's words, although Athena's face was still pale, she was unwilling to admit defeat and squeezed out a voice. Who do you think I am? How can this level of strength kill an immortal goddess? When the hero swung the powerful sword of salvation and released a white gold sun, directly attacking the invisible island, Noah directly carried Athena and jumped into the spatial fault opened by the sword of good departure to avoid the terrifying attack. Then, Athena immediately used her own life as the price to bring Noah out of the spatial fault. As the god of the underworld, Athena originally had the power to freely travel between the human world and the underworld. Using this power, Athena, who had exhausted her divine power and sacrificed her life force, forcefully opened the door to the human world and escaped with Noah. If it were not for Athena, it would not be easy for Noah to return to the ground. However, Athena, who used up her life force, was a little dangerous. Bear with it for a while. Noah slightly hugged Athena. I will immediately heal you. In Noah's treasure vault, there were as many items that could restore curse power and life force as there were stars in the sky. It should not be difficult to use these items to restore Athena to her peak. However, Athena seemed to have seen through Noah's thoughts. She held her chest and shook her head with a painful expression. There is no need to do unnecessary healing. Even if you restore my life force, it will not be long before my life force will immediately disappear. The unexpected bad news caused Noah to be stunned on the spot. Life force will disappear immediately? Then why? Chapter 1481. Once, in Nabali, Guinevere had used the aura of fire and wind to heal the injuries of Perseus, the god of steel. This was because fire and wind were closely related to the attributes of steel. Wind could make fire burn even more vigorously. Fire could smelt iron ore and forge a sword of steel. As the living god of swords, the heroes of steel naturally had a deep relationship with the wind and fire that smelted the sword of steel. This characteristic was used to the extreme by the heroes of steel, who were the strongest of the heroes of steel. As long as the heroes of steel appeared on the ground, they would be able to increase the aura of fire and wind, causing the ocean and the earth to continue to warm up. Through this method, the heroes could extract the essence of the earth to the greatest extent, conquering the ocean and the earth. Therefore, as long as the last king existed on the ground, the world's oceans and the earth would continue to warm up. In the end, the earth would completely dry up, the oceans would evaporate, and even the volcanoes would erupt one after another, causing the world to fall into destruction. The reason why the heroes of steel would be the last king in the world, other than the fact that they would only appear in the post-apocalyptic era when there were multiple god-slayers, the most important reason was that they themselves would bring about the real end of the world. And in order to summon the island of the snake demon, which used to belong to my clone, to this world, I have already intertwined my own life force with this land. Athena closed her eyes, as if she was feeling the remaining life force in her body, and said without a trace of emotion, since that man is conquering this land and extracting the essence of the earth, then my life force will naturally be extracted along with it. Even if you restore my life force, It will only delay it for a while. If that's the case, then you should cut off your connection with the earth. Noah frowned. Or is there a reason why I can't do it? Exactly. Athena said faintly. The reason why I intertwined my life force with the earth is to summon the island that belongs to me. The invisible island will act as a medium for the intertwining. If the island is still there, then I can cut off the connection at any time. Athena looked at Noah. Now that the island has been destroyed, it will take a lot of time to cut off the connection with the earth. By that time, this land will have been conquered by the heroes. Even if I still have some life force left, I will die along with this land. Hearing this, Noah's frown deepened. Is there no way to stop this from happening? If you want to stop it, it's not that difficult. You just have to stop that man from extracting the essence of the earth. In other words, you have to stop that man from causing the end of the world, Athena said in a magnanimous tone, as though she wasn't talking about her own affairs. And to stop the end of the world, there are only two ways. 1. The hero who annihilates the demon king has completed his mission and slays all the god-slayers who rule the world. After completing this mission, the hero would return to the appearance of the divine blade and continue to hibernate, allowing the world to return to peace. 2. Defeat the hero who destroyed the demon king. As long as he could defeat the hero would turn back into a divine blade and go back to sleep. However, in this case, the hibernation was temporary. Heroes who were known as steel had immortality similar to that of an indestructible body. The hero's undying nature was even greater than the authority of the undying bodies. As mentioned before, when a hero awakens from a long slumber, he will lose all of his strength. In this state, even the hero who annihilated the demon king was relatively weak. Could it be that the hero did not encounter any enemies before he recovered his strength? The answer was naturally no. In fact, the last king was not undefeated. On the contrary, the hero had lost to the god-slayers many times since ancient times. However, even if he was killed, it would take a few months to a few years. Sooner or later, the hero would wake up again. It was precisely because of this that this hero was able to continue fighting without stopping. However, if the god-slayer's power was fully restored, then there was almost no god-slayer who had the ability to defeat the hero. Because when he fully recovers, that man will be able to wield the privilege of annihilating the demon king. Athena looked up at Noah. You should have guessed that the man had such means, right? Noah nodded helplessly. When dealing with the great sage, heaven's equal, the great sage had used the ancient oath of allegiance to increase his strength when dealing with multiple god-slayers. That ancient covenant was made by the gods to annihilate the demon king. The great sage, heaven's equal, claimed that this was a power that only a very small number of great heroes of the steel could wield. Since that was the case, as the hero who annihilated the demon king, how could the last king not have this authority? Noah had already guessed that the last king would definitely be able to use the ancient covenant to buff him. However, don't compare the power that the monkey imitated with the real covenant. Athena stated a shocking fact. The real covenant used to annihilate the demon king is not only effective against multiple god-slayers. The hero who can wield the real ancient covenant, as long as there is more than one demon king in the world, will be able to wield it in proportion to the number of people. As long as there is more than one demon king in the world, the hero can wield the covenant. Noah was shocked. Moreover, the amount of increase is proportional to the number of people. Doesn't that mean that as long as there is not only one god-slayer left in the world, then the hero can always wield the blessing of the ancient covenant? Moreover, if the amount of increase is proportional to the number of people, then that means that the more god-slayers there are, the more power the hero can wield from the ancient covenant will be. The reason why the hero's power had such a terrifying and explosive increase, even reaching the 3 digits of Hakeda's level, was because of this? Noah smiled bitterly. I never thought that I would actually meet a powerful enemy that is on par with that lizard. In terms of power, the hero and the 3-headed dragon who were greatly enhanced by the ancient covenant were both in the 3 digits. Moreover, if it was the 3-headed dragon, he wouldn't die unless he solved the mystery of the final trial of a human. The hero's words were even more exaggerated. Until now, he had not truly died, and every time he was defeated, he could be revived. That was simply unsolvable, was it not? That is why I said that even you will become a ghost under that man's sword. Athena smiled helplessly. Now, do you still want to refute my words? Noah was speechless. If the hero was really so difficult to deal with, then indeed even Noah did not know what to do. Thinking of this, Noah could not help but feel anxious. Is there really no way to stop Athena's death? Could it be that he had to watch this goddess who had too much of an ill-fated relationship with him return to a legend? Athena clearly saw the anxiety in Noah's eyes. Her beautiful snake eyes flickered a few times, and after a moment of silence she sighed. You are really a strange man. You are actually so worried about your old enemy. I really don't know if I should praise you for being tolerant of your enemy, or condemn you for being seduced by a woman. Saying this, lying in Noah's arms, Athena stretched out her slender arms and wrapped them around Noah's neck, looking straight into his eyes. The reason why humans are afraid of losing their lives is because their lives are limited, so they fear death. For the gods who have unlimited lives, death is not something to be afraid of. I am the goddess who represents immortality, so I should be more open-minded and face death directly. Otherwise, how can I be qualified to be called a goddess? Athena smiled sweetly. So using this method to escape the fate of death is simply adding a stain to my name. However, I don't want to see you sad and cowardly. There is really no other way. After saying this, Athena suddenly put her face close to Noah's face and lightly kissed his lips. Chapter 1482. The sudden kiss caused Noah to freeze completely in place. Looking at Athena's beautiful face, Noah's eyes widened slightly. In fact, this was not the first time Noah and Athena had kissed. When they were in Nabali, in order to heal Athena, who was seriously injured by Perseus, Noah had also kissed her and used the power of the priest avatar to protect Athena. However, at that time, Noah only wanted to heal Athena and did not have any other thoughts. This time, under Athena's surprise attack, although Noah's mind went blank for a moment, he was completely attracted by the soft touch on his lips. Under such circumstances, Athena boldly took the initiative to extend her pink tongue into Noah's mouth and entangled it with Noah's tongue. The taste of their lips and tongues intertwined was self-evident. Noah was also in a passive state after being ambushed by Athena. The pleasure brought by Athena's kiss made him go in circles. Undoubtedly, Noah had always said that as an eternal virgin goddess, Athena's body and mind could not be captured by a mortal, let alone a god. However, she was so bold when kissing him that Noah subconsciously held his breath. But then, Athena's voice sounded in Noah's heart. I know that you also have the power of the draconic serpent in your power. The constitution of the God-Slayer could reflect all spells except for those that were effective on the gods, whether it was beneficial or not. However, if the spell was directly injected into the body of the God-Slayer through kissing, then even if the spell was not effective on the gods, it would still be effective. Now, Athena was injecting her power into Noah's body through kissing, directly communicating with Noah's mind. The power of dragons and serpents that Athena mentioned was probably referring to the incarnation of the dragon emperor. Maintaining the passionate kiss with Noah, Athena spoke in his mind while tangling with Noah's lips. I am the goddess of snakes. Since I am a snake, there will be times when I enter hibernation. Snakes sleep in the winter and awaken in the spring. This characteristic is why snakes are the symbol of immortality. Athena's body began to emit a faint light. Now, I will resonate with the draconic serpent force in your body. I will abandon my current life form and merge with your body, sharing a life with you. This way, I will be able to completely sever my connection with the earth and enter a state of suspended animation like a hibernating snake. Athena's body began to disintegrate into faint particles of light. If you can really defeat that man, I will give you a surprise when the time comes. However, if even you fail, I will accompany you to the underworld and welcome death. The girl who slowly disintegrated into light particles was like a burst of starlight, gathering around Noah and merging into his body. My nemesis, live on. Even that brave warrior will be able to overcome you. If you die in the hands of someone other than me, even if I reach the underworld, I will not let you go. Leaving such a sentence, Athena's figure completely disintegrated into light particles, merging into Noah's body and disappearing. At the same time, in the depths of Noah's heart, on the outline of the stone plate connected to the 10 patterns, the pattern representing the incarnation of the dragon emperor flashed. A ray of light in the shape of a snake seemed to wrap around the pattern of the dragon emperor. Then, like a snake that had fallen into hibernation, there was no more movement. Only then did Noah realize what was going on. However, the body temperature of the girl in his arms had long disappeared, leaving Noah alone kneeling on the ground with one knee facing the wind, looking into the distance. Stroking his heart and feeling the weak life of the goddess, Noah could not help but smile helplessly. It seems that no matter what, I have to defeat that unbeatable brave warrior. Be it in terms of strength or difficulty, the hero with the divine blade of salvation was not inferior to Aziz Dakar. But I don't intend to compromise even with Aziz Dakaha. Noah clenched his fist. This time I will definitely not lose miserably like the last time. After making up his mind, Noah looked into the distance again, then resolutely turned around and walked towards the city. It was late at night when he went to fight with Athena. After the duel with Athena and witnessing the power of the last king, Noah, who was walking towards the hotel, glanced at the sky and estimated the current time. It should be around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There is still some time before dawn. The brave warrior who annihilated the demon king had awakened. Then, according to the mission, the brave warrior should soon start a war with the current world's godslayers. And the first people to bear the brunt of the attack were naturally Noah and Yarek, who were closest to the last king. Since the last king can increase his power according to the number of godslayers in this world, it will be easy for him to determine whether I am dead or not. After all, the ancient covenant of the brave warrior increased his power according to the number of godslayers. Once a godslayer died, the power of the brave warrior would decrease. Since Noah was not dead, the power of the brave warrior would naturally not decrease. And as long as his power did not decrease, the brave warrior would definitely know that Noah was not dead. I just don't know if the brave warrior will take the initiative to come to me. Noah thought silently. I hope before dawn he won't find me. After dawn, Noah's authority would be able to completely adapt to this world. At that time Noah, who could use his authority, would have a chance of winning against the last king. Without being able to use his authority, Noah would definitely not be a match for the last king who had gained the power of 7 godslayers. Therefore, Noah must wait until dawn. As long as he waited until dawn, Noah would personally meet the king of the apocalypse without the need for the brave warrior to come to him. If he did not wait until dawn, Noah had no chance of winning. Thinking of this, Noah suddenly had a flash of inspiration and stopped. No chance of winning? Noah narrowed his eyes. I'm afraid not. Noah thought of a way to deal with the last king. No. It should be a way to reduce the power of the last king and make him easier to deal with. Unfortunately, Noah did not have that much time to implement that method. Moreover, implementing that method was the same as letting Noah kill people for a purpose. Among the people he killed, there might even be people who had a close relationship with Noah, or even people who did not know him. That kind of thing, I can't do it. Noah laughed at himself and continued to walk in the direction of the hotel. When Noah returned to the hotel, Alice suddenly rushed out without saying a word. She directly dragged the stunned Noah into the room. It wasn't until Noah arrived at Alice's room that he realized something was wrong. There was already a guest here. Seeing you safe and sound, I don't know whether to be happy or sad. With such a sentence, the godslayer, known as the Black Prince, sat on a seat, looked at Noah, and said very straightforwardly, Anyway, I apologize to you first. I didn't keep an eye on Lancelot. When I realized that he was gone, the woman over there triggered the spirit vision and saw the whole thing. Noah raised his eyebrows, turned his head, and looked at Alice. So, you know what happened? I'm afraid I know more than you. Alice nodded seriously, which was rare. You don't know that Lord Guinevere is dead, right? Guinevere is dead. Noah suddenly froze. The god ancestor who secretly plotted against him was dead? Thinking of this, Noah realized. As for why the hero suddenly woke up, he did not know the reason. Chapter 1483. I see. Sitting across from Yarek, Noah shook his head with a bitter smile after listening to Alice's narration of the entire process of the hero's resurrection. In other words, Guinevere was able to find the hero, the last king, thanks to me and Athena, right? You could say that. Alice also smiled bitterly. It's not strange that the essence of Gaia could stimulate the god of steel. Lord Guinevere only expanded this foundation by a few times, even at the cost of his own life. Removing the seal of the draconic serpent, increasing the essence of Gaia, stimulating the divine aura of the last king, and using the spiritual eye to spy on the location of the last king. It's quite a simple method, Yerek said slowly. It's very similar to the method that short-sighted woman would use. But I have to say, Guinevere's self-sacrifice did indeed restore the last king to his prime. Even after his death, he still brings us a lot of trouble. What an annoying guy. When the hero who annihilated the demon king woke up, his state would be very incomplete, and all his power would be lost. Only by absorbing enough essence of Gaia could the hero recover to his full state and carry out the mission of annihilating the demon king. If he couldn't recover to a certain state, the hero wouldn't even be able to carry out the ancient covenant of annihilating the demon king. Compared to the other disobedient gods, the hero was much less of a threat. The problem was that the hero not only had an extremely strong immortality, but also had a large number of followers around him. Lancelot has already recovered to his disobedient state, and the god of wind, whose true face is unknown, but who seems to be able to control the wind, Yerek said in a calm tone. The enemy is not just an unmatched hero. There are also two disobedient gods with outstanding power. This situation can no longer be described as troublesome. Despite saying so, Yerek didn't show any signs of pressure at all, as if he wasn't worried at all that the hero who annihilated the demon king would find him. This calmness caused Alice to speak in a provocative manner. Since the enemy is unprecedentedly powerful, why are you still so calm? Do you have a way to deal with such a powerful faction? Let's not talk about whether the enemy camp can be dealt with. Yerek glanced at Alice and said without changing his expression. If it's just to deal with the last king, I do have a simple idea. This sentence made Alice stunned all of a sudden. Ignoring Alice, Yerek stared at the silent Noah with a meaningful look. I think you should have thought of that simple method, right? Noah met Yerek's gaze and curled his lips non-committally. That was indeed a simple method. Moreover, Noah did think of that method on the way back to the hotel. At this moment, Yerek bluntly explained the method that was said to be simple, but was definitely enough to shock the entire world. Since the number of god slayers in the world today is greater, the power of the hero who annihilates the demon king will be stronger. Then, as long as the number of god slayers is reduced to only one person, the last king can't even activate the ancient covenant. Isn't that enough? The shocking idea finally came out of Yerek's mouth and made Alice's pretty face freeze. But it had to be said that Yerek's method was the best way to guarantee victory over the last king. Why was the hero so much more powerful than the other gods of disobedience, even reaching a 3-digit level? Without a doubt, it was all because of the ancient covenant. Noah believed that the hero's power and threat were on par with Azedakaha, who was known as the final human trial. But that was for Noah personally. In fact, if he really wanted to calculate, the threat of the three-headed demonic dragon was undoubtedly much more terrifying than the hero who annihilated the demon king. After all, Azedakaha was a terrifying existence that could threaten the entire Hekada and even the entire world. The demonic dragon that had once defeated millions of gods made the 3-digit number of Hekada's existences fearful. And the reason why Azedakaha could become a terrifying existence that the entire Hekada could not resist was because of one reason. Simulated star map, another cosmology. It was called Avestas, another cosmology of simulated creation of the stars. That was the real reason why Azedakaha was feared by millions of gods. That another cosmology could imitate the target's cosmology by defining oneself as the rightmost side of good and evil, using it as a mirror to host oneself, counteracting the power used by the target. It could also imitate the target's own characteristics without any changes until the target left the battle, or was defeated. There were only two cosmologies that could not be imitated by this another cosmology. One was the Zoroastrianism cosmology that was of the same origin as Azedakaha. The other was the human cosmology that was the target of Azedakaha's trial. Apart from these two cosmologies, if an opponent with other cosmologies came, Azedakaha would be able to obtain all the power of that person. If 10 came, he would be able to obtain the power of those 10 people. Even if there were hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of people, he would be able to obtain all the power of his opponents. Therefore, even if millions of gods were his opponents, Azedakaha could defeat all the gods with absolute power, bringing the most extreme terror to the entire Hekada. Not to mention, Azedakaha could also use another cosmology to offset the abilities of his opponents. That was the true unsolvable. However, apart from another cosmology, there were many people in the Hakata who could surpass Azedakaha in terms of power. Not to mention anything else, just in terms of power, White Yaksha was definitely stronger than Azedakaha. Not only White Yaksha, but even Gagir would be above Azedakaha if he obtained the sovereignty of a few sons and completed a part of the spiritual core. Otherwise, Azedakaha's head and shoulders wouldn't have been pierced through, leaving only his heart, which exposed many of his weaknesses. As for the hero, his power should only be in the 4 digits. However, the ancient covenant gave the hero an increase in strength equivalent to 7 Godslayers, allowing the hero's strength to rise to the 3-digit level. In other words, the 3-headed dragon and the hero, one could not use a cheat, while the other could use a cheat without restraint. As a result, the two were on the same level. There was no need to say who was the greater threat. However, the 3-headed dragon's another cosmology had no effect on Noah, while the hero's ancient covenant could be used without restraint. Therefore, to Noah, the 3-headed dragon and the hero were on the same level of power and threat. In other words, as long as he could make the hero unable to use a cheat like the demonic dragon, this person would not be a threat to Noah. Your power is particularly outstanding even among us. I believe that no one will have any objections. Yarek spoke as if he was trying to induce Noah, but also as if he was talking to himself. For you, the hero who can activate the covenant is the real enemy, but the rest of your kind are not necessarily the same. If you want, you have the ability to implement this plan. After saying that, Yarek finally looked directly at Noah. In that case, why don't you give it a try? Hearing this, Noah looked at Yarek. His dark, deep eyes were filled with coldness. Yarek also looked at Noah, his eyes containing some sharpness. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became tense. Chapter 1484. An indescribable tension pervaded the entire space. Noah and Yarek both looked straight at each other. Their intertwined gazes seemed to be able to create sparks, making the surrounding atmosphere more and more tense. At this time, Alice, who was watching this scene unfold, chose to remain silent. There was no other reason. As Yarek's political enemy, Alice could easily guess the Black Prince's motive for saying this. Alice believed that Noah could also understand why Yarek said this. As expected, Noah curled his lips and said sarcastically, "If you want to test me, can you please use a more sophisticated method?" In response to Noah's words, Yarek remained calm and collected as he said this. "I don't think I can come up with a probing method that you can't detect in a short time." "Then you might as well ask me directly." Noah shrugged. "Ask me if I have any thoughts of attacking you." "Actually, I'm doing the same, right?" Yarek said leisurely. "Since I'm using such an unsophisticated probing method, it's the same as asking you directly. There's not much difference." "Is that so?" Noah glanced at Yarek. "You're really not an ordinary troublemaker. Please call it a polite negotiation method," Yarek retorted. "After all, it's too rude to ask directly, isn't it?" "That really surprises me." Alice couldn't help but interject. "Alexander, I just want to know, when did you talk about manners? Because I'm different from a pretentious princess like you." Yarek retorted, not to be outdone. "I know very well what kind of person I should be polite to and what kind of person I should be direct with. Unlike you, woman who pretends to be polite but is actually careless." Yarek's words made Alice open her mouth again. She was about to continue retorting but was stopped by Noah, who was annoyed beyond words. "It doesn't matter whether I'm polite or careless, right?" Noah said impatiently. "It's fine as long as it's cute, right?" The entire place fell silent. Yarek looked at Noah strangely. Alice, on the other hand, blushed. She lowered her head and started to fidget. Only then did Noah realize that he had said something so immoral. He immediately coughed and changed the topic. "No matter what, I will go and meet that hero after daybreak and decide the victor between us." In other words, Noah would not kill the rest of the Godslayers just to weaken the power of the last king. "Is that so?" Yarek nodded indifferently, but in his heart, he let out a sigh of relief. Yarek's words were from the bottom of his heart. In terms of combat prowess, Noah was superior to the other Godslayers. Even Warban and Luo Hao, who were known as the oldest Godslayers, had been defeated by Noah in one fell swoop when they fought together. Yarek had also fought with Noah before. In the battle between Noah and Athena, he had seen the attack that could split heaven and earth. He was really afraid of Noah. Therefore, Yarek wanted to probe a little to see if Noah was likely to attack the rest of the Godslayers in order to defeat the last king. If Noah had such intentions, then compared to the last king, Yarek felt that he needed to be more vigilant against this unusual fellow. Now, Noah said that he did not intend to use such a convenient method, which did indeed make Yarek feel a little relieved. Then Yarek pondered for a while and looked directly at Noah. How are you going to deal with the hero who annihilated the demon king? What? Noah looked at Yarek with a half-smile. Do you want to help? Help? Yarek did not answer but asked instead. Do you need my help? Hearing this, Noah also did not answer but asked instead. Can you deal with Lancelot and the masked wind god at the same time? At the same time. Yarek pondered for a while and then gave such an answer. If it's just dealing with them, it shouldn't be a problem to use some small tricks. Small tricks? Noah suddenly laughed. Okay, then I'll leave Lancelot and the masked wind god to you. In other words, you will still be responsible for dealing with the last king, right? Yarek asked directly. Do you have a chance of winning? Open your eyes wide and see for yourself whether you have a chance of winning or not. Noah turned his gaze to Alice. Can I trouble you to help me find the whereabouts of Erica and the others? When the last king descended and sunk the entire invisible island with the blade of salvation that could even cut a star, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kira should have been on the island as well. Logically speaking, under the attack of the blade of salvation, even Noah and Athena chose to avoid it. In the face of such an attack, the four girls definitely had no chance of surviving. Fortunately, before the battle with Athena, Noah gave Avalon to the girls. With the protection of the scabbard, the girls should be able to escape the disaster. Noah returned to the hotel at a leisurely pace because he thought that the girls were likely to have returned here first. Now, it seemed that the girls had not returned yet. In response, Alice said, Erica has already returned. In fact, Erica and the others have already returned. After learning that the last king has woken up, they went out again, preparing to investigate the hero's current actions. Is that so? Noah frowned slightly. They even went to the Wanli Valley? Yes. Alice nodded. Miss Yoli's spirit vision is quite remarkable. That's why Erica suggested that we bring Miss Yoli along to see if she can see some of the true colors of the last king. Maybe Miss Yuan can notice the weaknesses that nobody else has. Is that so? Noah relaxed his frown. Then Erica and the others should be near the last king now, right? Yes. Alice asked curiously. What's wrong? No, I just happened to think of something. Noah suddenly smiled. Alice, please contact Erica and ask her to do something for me. What's the matter? Alice and Yarek both looked at Noah. Under the gaze of Alice and Yarek, Noah said, Help me send something to the last king. Both Alice and Yarek were stunned by his words. On the other side, on the outskirts of a city, the hero Lancelot and the masked wind god slowly walked over and stepped onto the lush green lawn. As soon as he stepped onto the lawn, the hero let out a sorrowful sigh. This was because with the arrival of the hero, the greenery on the lawn withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a moment, the life of the flowers and grass was taken away, turning into a withered land of death. Seeing this, the hero looked even more tired. We have to hurry. The brave warrior had seen the same thing happen many times. The existence of the kings in the apocalypse itself was an opportunity that led to the apocalypse. In order to prevent the world from being destroyed, the hero only had one thing to do. That was to find the current generation of Godslayers and have a duel to the death with them. There was no other way. Looking at the city in front of him, the hero lifted his foot and stepped into it. However, at this moment, a faint light suddenly appeared in the air and landed in front of the hero and the others. The hero was startled. Oh! Lancelot and the masked wind god were also surprised. This was because the figures of a few girls had appeared in the faint light. They were humans. You are the one known as the last king, right? The girl named Erica Brantley took a step forward, looked at the hero, and spoke with an elegant smile without any hesitation. Hero who annihilated the demon king. My lord has something to give you. Chapter 1485. When Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Hui Na went to the place where the hero killed the Demon King and delivered the things that Noah requested, Noah stayed alone in the hotel room. At this time, Noah was closing his eyes and accepting the information that suddenly came into his mind. Noah Dole LV. 5 Strength, SSS, 1840, SSS, 2000, Durability, SSS, 1847, SSS, 2000, Dexterity, SSS, 1856, SSS, 2000, Agility, SSS, 1866, SSS, 2000, Magic, SSS, 1859, SSS, 2000, Mystery, D-Magic, D-Swordsman, DC Smash, DC Magic, Weapon Refinement, Steel-Making Magic. Duplicate, refine and forge weapons. Duplicate, refine and forge weapons will be weakened to a certain extent according to the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Duplicate, refine, and forge weapons will be maintained for a long time according to the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Protection of sword. Permanent magic. Permanent protection according to the attributes of the contract spirit. Contract spirit as a sword spirit. Obtain the protection of the sword spirit and weaken physical attacks on oneself. The degree of weakening increases or decreases according to the strength and ability of the target. Cold smelting. Quick attack magic. Gradually turn the target into steel. Successful tempering will crush it. Tempering speed is determined according to the strength and ability of the target. Skills protection from the world. Permanent skill. Equal to luck. Events that have a direct relationship with luck will eventually lead to the most favorable result. After accepting the information that was suddenly fed back into his mind, Noah opened his eyes and murmured, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I didn't expect that I can't level up after meeting the requirements. In order to increase the winning rate when dealing with the hero, Noah hid in the room and updated his ability value before dawn. Before Noah's ability value was updated, it was almost close to the peak of 2000 proficiency, which was almost enough to level up. After coming to this world, Noah fought with Susanu, Monkey King, and Athena, the 3 highest level gods of disobedience, one after another, so he should have accumulated a lot of experience points. Therefore, Noah thought that if he updated his ability value at this time, he might be able to increase the proficiency of his basic abilities to the peak and meet the requirements for leveling up. If he can level up to LV 6, then Noah's winning rate against the hero will increase a lot. However, after updating ability value, Noah got an expected result and an unexpected result. The expected result was that all 5 basic abilities had reached the upper limit of 2000 proficiency and could be upgraded to the next level. The unexpected result was that Noah didn't meet the other condition. If Noah wanted to level up, he had to fulfill 2 conditions. First, all ability SSS level. Proficiency level proficiency SSS level proficiency. Second, accumulate enough achievements to level up to the next level. The first condition in the past had always been the reason why Noah was unable to level up. As for the latter condition, it wasn't difficult for Noah to achieve great feats because he had always been dealing with those who were extremely powerful as his opponents. Therefore, before this, the second condition had never been the reason why Noah couldn't level up. But this time, Noah was bound by the second condition of leveling up. I've fought with a god as an opponent many times, but it's not considered great achievements? In the world of looking for a chance encounter in the underground city, generally speaking, the second condition was the reason why people who received the grace given by the gods couldn't level up. After all, the so-called great achievements generally referred to the accumulation of miraculous experience points. For example, defeating opponents who were stronger than oneself. For example, crusading against the floor master alone. For example, killing powerful monsters. For example, completing a trial that ordinary people couldn't complete. All of these were the so-called great achievements. Naturally, it was extremely difficult to achieve these conditions. Therefore, leveling up was the dream of every adventurer. However, in the past, this problem had never bound Noah. This was because the opponents that Noah had challenged time and time again were existences that were far beyond his ability value. Therefore, it was also regarded as a great achievement, so Noah had never been bound by this problem. Now, this problem finally became the reason why Noah was unable to level up. It seems that with my current level, it's impossible to level up like taking advantage of loopholes. Noah came to this conclusion helplessly. If I don't achieve great achievements, I guess I can't level up now, right? In any case, Noah's current level had reached LV5. Moreover, Noah's LV5 had accumulated basic abilities that others absolutely couldn't achieve in the previous few levels. Who could be like Noah, who had to upgrade the basic abilities to the SSS stage of 2000 proficiency every time he leveled up? Others only needed to upgrade one of the basic abilities to the D stage of 500 proficiency to accumulate one of the conditions for leveling up. The difficulty was simply not on the same level as Noah. In view of this, when leveling up, the basic abilities would be accumulated as hidden abilities. Noah's LV5 level was probably higher than Eulalie's LV7 level. Under such circumstances, Noah finally reached the bottleneck where he had to achieve a truly great feat in order to level up. Should I say it's God's will? Noah suddenly smiled. Right now, there is a suitable challenge target for great achievements. In any case, although the proficiency improved was relatively small, it still reached the limit of LV5. It was better than not improving at all, right? Next, I just need to wait until dawn. Just as Noah said this to himself, there was a knock on the door. Then a voice rang out. "King, are you there?" It was the voice of Kanishi. "There is a person I hope you can meet." Noah's eyebrows suddenly raised slightly. 3 minutes later, Noah, led by Kanishi, came to the hotel's VIP room. Here, 3 people had already arrived in advance. One was Yerek, known as the Black Prince. One was Alice, known as Princess White. There was another one, who was wearing a suit and tie, dressed like a member of society, but much younger than Kanishi. "Let me introduce you," Kanishi said to Noah. "This is the head of the Tokyo branch of our History Compilation Committee, the next head of the Sayamiya family, one of the 4 major families in Japan's curse world, Miss Sayamiya." "Sayamiya family?" Noah was startled at first, then looked over in amazement. "Miss? A lady in a suit and a bow tie? Nice to meet you, Noah-sama." Sayamiya showed a bright smile that didn't look like a young girl's. "Everyone seems to be surprised by my appearance after knowing my true gender. But don't look at me like this now, I'm still Yuri and Huina's classmate. We are the same batch of Yuanwu witch." After saying this, Sayamiya gestured to the seat in front of her. "Anyway, please sit down, No-sama. Even I feel a little scared to let a king stand." Hearing Sayamiya's words, Noah couldn't help but smile bitterly, but he still obediently went forward and sat down. Alice and Yerek sat down with him. As for Kanishi, he stood behind Sayamiya, waiting for orders. Chapter 1486. The head of the Tokyo branch of the History Compilation Committee, the next head of the House of Saya? Noah sat down and looked at Saya Miyazaki curiously. "So, you are the future leader of the Japanese spell community?" In the past, the House of Saya was the one who won the power struggle among the 4 major families. The founder of the History Compilation Committee was also the previous head of the House of Saya. As the next head of the House of Saya, it was only a matter of time before Saya Miyazaki became the head of the History Compilation Committee and the leader of the entire Japanese spell community. Toward this, Saya Gong-Exan said with an indifferent attitude, "Actually, if possible, I don't want to become famous by inheriting the family business. I want to go out and do things on my own." Saya Miyazaki said to Noah in a half-joking, half-serious tone. "Lord Noah seems to be very close to our witch Yuan. Why don't you stay here and let me work under you? Let's build a force bigger than the History Compilation Committee." Hearing this, Noah was somewhat speechless. Not only Noah, but Alice and Yerek also looked at Saya Miyazaki speechless. After all, the History Compilation Committee was a force established by the House of Saya. As the next head of the Sha Yigong family, it was one thing for Sha Yigong Exan to want to establish her own family, but she actually wanted to replace her family's power. For this reason, she did not hesitate to rope in the Demon King who killed a god, making everyone speechless. "She seems to be a brave person," Yerek said with a sigh. "This reminds me of the time when I first became a godslayer. There was a little girl who hadn't even reached adulthood who made a declaration in front of me, asking me to join her. In the end, I rejected her, and since then she has been at odds with me. That's an unpleasant memory." Indeed, Alice also sighed. I also remember when I learned all the knowledge of druids. A man who claimed to be completely different from the rest of his kind barged into my house and said to me, "I need your wisdom. If you help me, I might be able to pay you." After I rejected him, he started to target me everywhere. After saying that, Alice and Yarek looked at each other, their eyes showing extreme disgust for each other. The corners of Noah's mouth twitched. He was speechless once again. So this was how the enmity between the two of them started? Noah really wanted to say something. Are the two of you children? On the other hand, Saya Gongshin had an interesting expression. So there is such a grudge between the Black Prince and the White Princess. Fortunately I came, or else I wouldn't have known about such an interesting past. Noah needed to correct his thoughts. Among the people here, there weren't only 2 children. There were 3 of them. Noah felt that there would be no end to this, so he said to Saya Gongshin directly, "Are you here because of the request I made to the History Compilation Committee?" Before Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Kira went to the location of the last king to deliver the items to Noah. Noah called Gonchi Winterhorse and made a request. "I heard about that request from Mr. Gonchi." Saya Gongshin looked at Noah and said, "I remember that Master Noah asked the History Compilation Committee to find a spacious and uninhabited place for you to use as a battlefield, right?" "That's right." Noah nodded. "I'm sure the History Compilation Committee already knows about the current situation. We need to deal with a few troublesome enemies. For this we need to make some preparations. The location isn't a problem. We'll arrange it as soon as possible." Saya Gongshin's smile faded bit by bit. "However, we also found some troublesome situations here." "Troublesome situations?" Noah was slightly taken aback. "Troublesome situations?" Yarek was also taken aback. Only Alice seemed to have thought of something and looked at Saya Gongshin. "Are you referring to the changes in the volcanic area?" Alice's words made everyone's eyes focus on her. "What?" Saya Gongshin was a little surprised. "Miss Alice, do you already know? Spirit vision was activated just now, and I saw some scenes." Alice looked around at the people present. "I'll show you the scenes with the elf sensing ability." Alice closed her eyes as soon as she finished speaking, and dense spell power surged out of her body. A dazzling white light flashed out of Alice's body and filled the entire VIP room. Then, in the next moment, the entire VIP room seemed to have been replaced by something else, and it changed. The scene that appeared in front of them made everyone's expression turn solemn. First, Noah and the rest saw a mountain. It was a very famous mountain in Japan known as the spiritual peak Mount Fuji. This #1 mountain that was known to everyone in the country had actually erupted. Flames and black smoke kept spewing out of the crater. Boiling lava flowed down the mountain and flowed to the ground. Huge rocks exploded and smashed in all directions. Vaguely, they could even see that some distance away from Mount Fuji, where the explosion occurred, people as small as ants were fleeing in panic. It was very noisy. At this moment, the scene around them changed completely and turned into another place. This time it was a mountain range of unknown origins. The mountain range seemed to be a volcanic area as well. Moreover, the craters of each of them were erupting, causing red flames to soar into the sky. Thick black smoke filled the air, and even the ground shook slightly. Under such circumstances, the surrounding scene seemed to be moving closer to the sky, making the volcanic area below become smaller and smaller, showing a broader scene of the earth. However, the scene that appeared made them speechless. There was the scene of volcanic ash covering the entire sky, causing the nearby cities to be covered with black smoke. There was the scene of cities being eroded by the hot lava and gradually being destroyed. There was the scene of hot rocks falling from the sky like raindrops smashing the buildings one by one. There was the scene of dark clouds condensed from the thick volcanic ash spreading to the surrounding sky little by little. There were only 4 words to describe these scenes. The end of the world. It was a terrible scene, as if the end of the world had come. After an unknown period of time, the doomsday scene began to disappear slowly, and the VIP room returned to its original state. These are not just scenes that are currently happening. Some of them are scenes of the future after my spirit vision was triggered. Alice let out a soft sigh and pulled herself together. She explained with an unprecedentedly serious expression, "I think if the last king continues to move in this world, those scenes will really happen, right?" Our official history compilation committee also received a lot of reports of volcanic eruptions and even changes in the Earth's crust. Sayakagong Xian continued. Now, in this country, a lot of volcanoes are showing signs of eruption, and even some extinct volcanoes seem to be showing signs of revival. If the same thing happens in other countries, then without a doubt this will be a world-class crisis. Noah and Yerek suddenly frowned. The last king to appear in the apocalypse. Yerek muttered something. I see, is this the meaning of the title Last King ? It seemed that Yerek knew who the culprit behind the changes in the world was. Sure enough, this is related to the troublesome enemies you mentioned. Sayakagong Xian sighed. Then looked up and looked at Noah and Yerek. Can we ask you two for help? Noah and Yerek suddenly looked at each other, then smiled faintly at the same time. Chapter 1487. About half an hour later, Sayamiya left the hotel with the winter horse. As the head of the Tokyo branch of the History Compilation Committee, as well as the next head of the Sayamiya family and the future general of the committee, Sayamiya said that no matter what, the entire Japanese spell community would fully support Noah and Yerek. If they did not do so, the History Compilation Committee would not be able to cope with this disaster. This also showed why the humans in the world today needed the Godslayers. Because, other than the Godslayers, there was no existence that could resist the gods and protect the humans and the world from the gods. Therefore, humans worshipped the Godslayers as kings. Even if it was a demon king who could bring great terror, it was the same. As the only two Godslayers who were still alive with their heads, Noah and Yerek both expressed their feelings about this situation, but they were not surprised by it. After all, as kings, they had encountered the same situation many times. In any case, with the full support of the forces that secretly controlled everything in this country for Noah and Yerek, it was a great help. At least, the problem of the venue was solved. Before she planned to visit Noah and Yerek, Sayamiya followed Noah's instructions and sent someone to prepare the venue. By the time Sayagong Xian left the hotel with the winter horse, the venue had already been prepared. Under such circumstances, Yerek directly left the hotel and went to the well-prepared venue. There were only two reasons why a venue was needed for the battle with the hero who annihilated the Demon King. First, to prevent the battle from affecting innocent people and causing casualties. Especially this time, the opponent was the savior who could use a divine sword that could even cut a star. He was someone who could sink an island and pierce through the sea and the earth with one strike. If the venue was not prepared, it would cause a lot of casualties. Second, for Yerek. Unlike the other Godslayers, Yerek was not very good at direct confrontation. If Yerek was given enough time and conditions to prepare, this Godslayer would be able to display a combat power that no one could ignore. In order to deal with Lancelot and the masked wind god, Yerek had to be fully prepared. Otherwise, even a Godslayer would be in danger when facing two disobedient gods at the same time. Because of this, Noah proposed to the official history compilation committee to prepare a venue. Now that the venue was ready, Yerek naturally had to leave and make preparations. It was estimated that this night, everyone would be so busy that they would not even have time to sleep. Of course, this did not include Noah. Noah had finished what he needed to do. Now Noah only had one mission. That was to wait for the arrival of dawn. As dawn approached, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Huina finally came back. As soon as she entered the room, Erica threw out such a sentence. I've already given your item to that Lord Hero. I think so too, Noah replied without any surprise. If that wasn't the case, that guy would have probably killed his way into the city and searched everywhere for me and Yerek, right? Now the hero of Saber, Lancelot, and the masked wind god are all on standby in the outskirts of the mountains, Liliana said with a serious expression. I think they'll wait until dawn before heading to the designated location for the duel. Right? That would be best. Noah shrugged and looked out the window at the sky that was beginning to brighten. As long as they can wait until dawn, then I'll be fully prepared. Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Huina exchanged glances with each other. Although they did not know why Noah had to wait until dawn, it was tactful not to ask at this time. Moreover, the group of girls could more or less guess the reason why Noah had to wait until dawn to take action. In fact, it was not difficult to guess. The North American Godslayer John Pluto Smith had the power called super transformation. It was a power that allowed people to transform into various forms, and use various incarnations. However, every time an incarnation was used, a corresponding sacrifice had to be offered. Otherwise, this power could not be activated. Not only that, after an incarnation was used, the incarnation could not be used again for 7 days. This kind of power that allowed one to use various abilities and incarnations generally had very strict usage time and conditions. Noah had once defeated the undefeated god of victory, Lana, who had 10 incarnations and was invincible with diverse abilities. Therefore, if Noah was like the North American god slayer and seized the power to use various abilities and incarnations from a god, then it was not strange that this power had strict usage conditions. Perhaps among them there were incarnations that could only be used after dawn? This was the thought of the girls. Although this idea wasn't completely correct, it was still a vague guess. Although Noah's power of 10 incarnations did not have any usage time or conditions, it did require him to wait until dawn to use it. Otherwise, if he used it without authorization, it would bring about some bad effects to this world. Of course, the girls did not know about these things, but they did not ask. This included Erica and Liliana, who had been following Noah for a long time. Only Yoli stepped forward slightly and came in front of Noah. She solemnly handed the scabbard that she had been holding in her arms to Noah. This is returned to its rightful owner. Noah was slightly stunned. Looking at the Avalon that Yoli handed to him with a solemn expression, he did not take it. Instead, he looked directly at Yoli. Compared to me, you need the protection of this scabbard more. Take it with you. No, king. Huina shook her head. The one who needs to use this incredible scabbard is the king. Huina and the others no longer need it. This sentence stunned Noah at first, but then he reacted. In other words, you won't be coming with me to the battle with the last king, right? That's a bit wrong, Erica corrected him. To put it simply, we can't go with you. Can't? Noah frowned and turned his gaze to Liliana. His eyes were full of curiosity. Now, the volcanic areas around the world have begun to mutate. The temperature of the sea and the earth is gradually rising. Even the temperature has begun to gradually increase. Soon, I'm afraid it will become a world-class disaster, Liliana explained. According to what you said, the appearance of the last king has caused the aura of fire and wind in the world to begin to increase. Therefore, in order to prevent the disaster from happening, all the magic associations in Europe are gathering members and preparing to hold a big ceremony to calm the aura of fire and wind. It's not just Europe. The History Compilation Committee has also issued a summons, preparing to gather all the witches and cursemancers in Japan to calm the spiritual energy of the earth and sea. Yuri said with a sense of mission. Although I don't know how much the aura of fire and wind can be suppressed by doing this, at least it can delay the arrival of the apocalypse. Is that so? Noah sighed. In other words, all of you have been summoned? There's nothing we can do about it. Liliana also sighed, which was rare. Although as a knight, it's absolutely unforgivable for the king to go to the battlefield alone, at the same time, it's not the right behavior of a knight to sit back and ignore the danger of others. Considering the issue of time, we won't return to Italy. Instead, we're preparing to hold the ceremony here with the History Compilation Committee. Erica looked at Noah. After all, this is a crisis of the world. The magic associations around the world must cooperate to calm the turmoil of the earth and sea together. On the contrary, this is the only thing that Huina and the others can do, Huina said to Noah with a smile. The only person who can really save the world is the king. Noah fell silent. Then he suddenly smiled. Leave it to me. The group of girls revealed extremely beautiful smiles that lasted for a long time. Chapter 1488. Just like that, dawn gradually arrived. In order to cooperate with the people of the Japanese magic circle to carry out the wind and fire aura calming ceremony, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kena all returned to their respective rooms in the hotel to prepare. According to Alice, after dawn, magic associations in various countries around the world would begin to hold calming ceremonies to control the aura of wind and fire. This was an unprecedented ceremony. Through the Sage Parliament, a neutral force that specialized in the study of godslayers, every force around the world discussed to hold a ceremony at the same time, combining the power of all magicians and cursemancers in the world to calm the aura of wind and fire. Only in this way could the increase of aura be maximized. If each country, each force, and each organization did their own thing and held the ceremony on their own, it would only reduce the aura of an area, just like water would flow to a lower place. Even if the aura of an area was reduced, the aura of other places would be replenished. In that case, the problem would not be solved at all. Therefore, through the Sage Parliament, a research force that did not belong to any party, all the forces around the world unanimously agreed that they must combine the power of all the forces in the world to hold a world-class ceremony together. Otherwise, the suppression of aura would not be carried out at all. But a world-class ceremony? That would definitely be an unprecedented ceremony, right? After all, the scope of effect was aimed at the whole world, and even the organizers of the ceremony were all forces in the world. Such a super large-scale ceremony was definitely something that had never been done before. In this regard, Alice, the girl who loved to join in the fun and was eager to see the world in chaos, was the most excited. A world-class large-scale ceremony. Such a ceremony, let alone in the past, I don't even know if it will appear in the future. Whether the last king eventually falls into a deep sleep because he annihilates all the demon kings, or you defeat the last king and make the apocalypse disappear after dawn, this ceremony will be recorded in the history books and become an eternal legend in the magic world. After leaving this sentence, Alice left the hotel. Next, Alice would return to London, England, to preside over the overall situation of this ceremony. There was no other way. How could such a grand ceremony on a worldwide scale be held just like that? Disregarding everything else, cooperation alone was a huge problem. Don't forget, the people who held the ceremony this time were from all corners of the world. Since they wanted to hold the ceremony together, they naturally had to cooperate with each other, divide the work, and figure out the timing of the ceremony. They also had to improvise. It was impossible to complete an unprecedented large-scale ceremony just by doing their own thing. Therefore, Alice's existence would become the center of this large-scale ceremony on a worldwide scale. Before the start of the ceremony, Alice would use her mental senses to connect the minds of all magicians and cursemancers in the world who intended to perform the ceremony. This way, everyone would be able to know each other's situation and cooperate with each other to hold the ceremony together. This was also the reason why Alice was so excited. If one were to say that this unprecedented world-scale ritual would go down in history and become a legend, then Alice, as the center of it all, would go down in history as a legend in the world of magic and spells. In the future, whenever someone mentioned this ceremony, they would definitely think of who was the center of this ceremony. In view of this, after tomorrow, Alice would probably become the princess of the world, not just the princess of Europe. For Alice, who loved to join in the fun, this was definitely something worth participating in. She would definitely say that this was very interesting. Of course, although Alice was known as the Witch of Europe and was known as the princess, she was still just an ordinary human. It was simply impossible to connect the minds of all the people in the world with her mental senses. However, Noah had once given Alice protection to protect the princess's health. The power of the protection would allow Alice to obtain a healthy body that could be counted in years. Now, Alice was ready to release all the protection that Noah had given her in one go, so that her mental senses would be greatly improved. In this way, Alice could connect the minds of all the people in the world. This made Noah understand one thing. This time, he wasn't the only one fighting against the last king. Although only Noah and Yarek were directly involved in the battle, all the magicians and cursemancers in the world would hold a ceremony after dawn to increase the aura of fire and wind to prevent the arrival of the apocalypse. Noah was fighting. Magicians and cursemancers from all over the world were also fighting. This would be a battle that combined the power of everyone in the world of magic and cursemancers. When he thought of this, Noah finally felt a sense of heaviness accumulating on his shoulders. That sense of heaviness was called responsibility. Noah, for the first time, had the feeling of carrying the hopes of all the people in the world in a battle. With this indescribable feeling, Noah unknowingly came to Yoli and Huina's room. Looking at the door in front of him, Noah was silent for a long time. Then he reached out and knocked on the door. After the door was knocked, Huey's loud voice rang out. "Come in." Hearing this, Noah directly opened the door and walked into Yoli and Huina's room. "Mr. Noah? King." Yoli and Huina didn't seem to expect that the person who came was Noah, so they were a little surprised. Noah found that the two witches were completely different from before. At this moment, Yoli wasn't wearing her usual witch costume, and Huina wasn't wearing her usual uniform either. Instead, she was wearing a white shirt and trousers, as well as a thin coat with pine and crane patterns. It was a costume called chihaya. Under normal circumstances, this was a formal dress that could only be worn during ceremonies, dances, or weddings. Moreover, it was a dress that could only be worn by the witches who worked in the same profession. The part-time witches who were temporarily recruited were not allowed to wear it. Dressed in such a sacred atmosphere, Yoli and Huina also wore gorgeous crowns and hairpins on their heads, and their waist-length hair was extremely soft and smooth on their slender backs. They were dressed very solemnly and conspicuously. That rare, solemn and gorgeous costume, coupled with the outstanding appearance of the two girls, was simply like a goddess descending to the earth, very beautiful. Looking at the solemn and gorgeous appearance of the two girls, Noah smiled slightly. "It seems that you are all ready." It said to be ready, but Huina and Yoli just changed into formal clothes. Huina, as usual, showed a smile without any scheming. Later, Exion will send someone to pick up Huina and Yoli and go to the place where the ceremony will be held. "So, we are preparing to say goodbye to Mr. Noah." Yoli was like a gentle woman, smiling reservedly. "I didn't expect Mr. Noah to come here first." "Is that so?" Noah smiled bitterly, then immediately looked at Yoli and Huina. "Actually, I'm also here to apologize to you." Noah's words made Yoli and Huina stunned at the same time. "Apologize?" Huina said strangely. "Why is the king apologizing?" Although Yoli didn't say anything, she also had a confused look. Obviously, she didn't understand why Noah suddenly apologized. Looking at the pretty faces of the two Yuan witches, Noah scratched his cheek. "You originally had your own peaceful lives, but that kind of life was ruthlessly broken after I came to this country. I am really very sorry." Hearing Noah's words, Yoli and Huina suddenly looked at each other. However, that was Noah's heartfelt words. Noah really felt sorry for these two girls. Especially Yoli. This girl had been nothing more than a witch guarding a small shrine. Although her spirit vision ability was quite outstanding, her other aspects were only average. Such a girl, let alone being sent to solve a world-class crisis, even some dangerous missions were not fated with her. However, after Yoli rescued Noah from the woods, this girl's peaceful life was completely broken, and she even encountered crises repeatedly. How could Noah not apologize properly? Chapter 1489. In fact, the time that Noah and Yuli had known each other was pathetically short. After all, Noah's adaptation time in this world was only 7 days. In other words, it had only been 7 days since Noah had returned to this world. Naturally, Noah and Yuli had only known each other for 7 days. However, a lot of things had happened in these 7 days. First, the God Slayer had come to this country. Then, the great sage equaling heaven, who had been imprisoned by the elders of the secluded world, had escaped. Later, Luohao, Athena, Yarek, Guinevere, Lancelot, and other supernatural beings beyond the reach of human beings had appeared one after another in this island country, causing great chaos one after another. Now, even the last king, who had only appeared in the apocalypse but would also bring about the end of the world, had ushered in the awakening, causing a disaster to the world that could not be ignored. 7 days ago, she was only guarding a small shrine, and this was too much for her to bear. 7 days ago, she had only been guarding a small shrine. Noah even remembered that 7 days ago, when he had just gotten to know Yoli, this young girl's attitude towards him was filled with reverence and extreme fear. Later, Noah learned from Kantori that in the past, because of Warban, Yoli had a very unpleasant experience, which led to an excessive fear of the God Slayer. However, even so, despite knowing that Noah was a godslayer and was seriously injured, Yuli still didn't choose to sit back and do nothing. Instead, he rescued Noah. Undoubtedly, she was so afraid of the godslayer and undoubtedly worried that the Demon King would harm this country. Yuli did not leave Noah to fend for himself and brought Noah home. There was no doubt that this was a very kind girl. It was because of this that Noah had made an agreement with Yoli. As long as Yoli listened to him obediently, he would also listen to her obediently. Then, he would allow the official history compilation committee to arrange an attendant for him. On the surface, it was to be responsible for guarding, but in fact it was to monitor. Unfortunately, life was unpredictable. When he was in Hidden World, because he didn't have to worry about causing any harm to the human world, Noah directly vented his dissatisfaction to Sisanu and the other elders of Hidden World, directly fighting them. As a result, this fight gave rise to a series of butterfly effects. First, Great Sage equaling Heaven's curse was split by Noah's sword. Furthermore, because the Great Sage equaling Heaven had escaped, Guinevere had also been lured over. If Guinevere had not been lured here, then the whereabouts of the last king would not have been discovered. If his whereabouts were not discovered, then the last king would not have been awakened and brought about a world-class crisis. What's more, in addition to the matter of the last king, Noah and Athena's ill-fated relationship has more or less affected the island. If that's the case, the reason for the current situation can be attributed to me. Noah looked at Yuli with mixed feelings. Undoubtedly, I made an agreement with you, but it still caused such a big mess. I have repeatedly put you in danger. I'm really sorry. After saying that, Noah looked at Huina and said sincerely, "Thank you. And you, Huina, I also have to apologize to you. Not only did I disrupt your cultivation, but I also brought you a lot of trouble. I can only apologize to you. Please forgive me." Yuli and Huina, who were originally looking at each other, gradually fell silent. After a while, Yuli suddenly spoke. "Indeed, Mr. Noah has caused so many disputes and disturbances. I have a lot to say to you." With such a sentence, Yuli changed the topic and looked at Noah with a gentle expression. "However, although the time we spent together is very short, I have already understood what kind of person Mr. Noah is." "Is that so?" Noah couldn't help but laugh. "Then in your eyes, what kind of person am I?" "To put it simply, you are a person who will be very rational when it's time to be rational, but also very impulsive when it's time to be impulsive. You will help those who are helpless, but you will also cause trouble for others, making people grateful and angry at the same time." Yuli said so in a gentle tone. "So, for such a Mr. Noah, I do have a lot to say to you, but I don't have time now." Hearing Yuli's words, Noah couldn't help but be startled, and then he immediately understood what Yuli meant. "Mr. Noah, please defeat the last king. Save this world, save my country, and then return to me in one piece." Yuli's gaze went straight to Noah, and a pair of eyes flashed with waves of emotions. At that time, "I will tell you everything I want to say." There was only one meaning in Yuli's words. "Don't die." This was the feeling that Yuli wanted to express. "Me too, Your Majesty," Huina hurriedly said, with the usual innocent smile on her face. To be honest, Huina doesn't know why Your Majesty is apologizing. Huina doesn't think that Your Majesty did anything wrong. Your Majesty asked Huina to come out of the mountains and be Your Majesty's follower. Huina is actually very happy because she doesn't feel bored at all by Your Majesty's side. Huina likes the feeling of being by Your Majesty's side. After saying that, Huina smiled shyly. So Huina also hopes that Your Majesty won't lose to the last king and come back alive. Then this time, Huina hopes to be Your Majesty's true follower, not a temporary guard. The words from the heart made Noah stare blankly at the pretty faces of the two Yuan witches. After a while, he finally relaxed and smiled helplessly. "Since you all said so, it seems that I really can't lose." With a helpless smile, Noah extended his hand to Yuli and Huina. "Then, I promise you that I will definitely come back victorious. At that time, please give me a lot of advice." Seeing Noah extend his hand to the two of them, Yuli and Huina both smiled shyly, but without hesitation, they also extended their hand and placed it on the back of Noah's hand. "You must abide by the agreement this time," Yuli said with extreme sincerity. "If this time Mr. Noah doesn't keep his promise with me, then I will definitely not forgive you." "Huina is the same," Huina said straightforwardly. "Your Majesty, when you come back, take Huina to various places to play." Noah nodded heavily and looked at the two Yuan witches with a smile. At this moment, a hand suddenly reached out and overlapped the hands of Noah, Yuli, and Huina. "Since you plan to bring your entourage along, there's no reason for you not to bring me Erica Browntree, right?" Erica, who had appeared out of nowhere, turned around and looked at Noah with a confident smile that was as gorgeous as her signature smile. "This is the first time I've taken the initiative to respond positively to a man's invitation for a date. You should be honored, Your Majesty." As soon as Erica said that, Another hand suddenly reached out from the side and overlapped the hands of the group. It's unforgivable for a knight to not be able to go to the battlefield with your majesty. Liliana, who also appeared out of nowhere, looked straight at Noah and said in an unquestionable tone, "But this time it's a special situation and there's no other choice. Next time, no matter where you go, Liliana Kranikar will go with you. Please don't forget about me, your knight, your majesty." You. Noah stared in astonishment at Erica and Liliana, who appeared out of nowhere. He opened his mouth and was about to say something when he understood what was going on. Yes, that's right. Erica Browntree and Liliana Kranjkar were his knights. He didn't need to speak much with his knights. Just like in the past, everything was in silence. They trusted each other, worked hard, and waited for the delayed reunion. That was enough. At this thought, Noah swept his gaze across the faces of Erica, Yuli, Liliana, and Huina. He exchanged gazes with the four young ladies and nodded firmly. The sun gradually rose in the warm atmosphere and illuminated the land. Chapter 1490. Following the rise of the sun, the warm sunlight sprinkled down from the sky, illuminating the entire earth. It was now autumn. Until yesterday, the weather was still somewhat cool. Therefore, the warm sunlight in the morning undoubtedly brought a comfortable feeling and warmed one's body and mind. However, this situation did not occur today. He didn't know if there was a mistake somewhere. Undoubtedly, yesterday's temperature was still quite low, bringing a cool feeling. Today the temperature was unusually high. In terms of temperature, yesterday was only 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, but today the temperature was at least 34 or 35 degrees Celsius. Under such circumstances, in a desolate suburb, two figures were exposed to the sun's merciless heat, standing against the wind, as if waiting for something. Those two figures were Noah and Yarek. Two young men of about the same age stood under the sun. They didn't care about the sunlight at all. Their eyes were closed, and they didn't say a single word. It wasn't until a certain moment that their eyelids trembled slightly, and they slowly opened their eyes. When they opened their eyes, both Noah and Yarek saw it. In front of them, a few figures were slowly walking towards them with clear footsteps. If those figures were walking on the street, they would definitely attract everyone's attention in an instant, right? There was no other reason. No matter how one looked at it, the three of them were too conspicuous. One was wearing a full body armor that covered his entire body. One was wrapped in white bandages all over his body and wore a mask. The remaining one looked relatively normal, but on his back was an indescribable sword that exuded an indescribable aura. His presence was even stronger than the other two. These three people stepped on the ground, and amidst the sound of unhurried footsteps, they walked to a place not far from Noah and Yarek and stopped. Whoosh! A gust of hot wind suddenly blew past, stirring up a gust of wind and sand. Noah looked at the warrior with the long sword on his back, his eyes flashing slightly. He didn't need to look to know that Yarek was also looking at the hero with the long sword on his back. Although the knight in full armor and the strange man in the mask had an aura that couldn't be ignored, they paled in comparison to the hero with a sword on his back. The aura emanating from the hero with the long sword on his back gave people the illusion that he was abnormally tall and big. Feeling that kind of aura, Noah no longer had the spare energy to pay attention to Lancelot and the masked wind god, let alone Yarek. Therefore, Yarek chose to remain silent, sizing up the hero with his gaze. Lancelot and the masked wind god, who were following the hero, remained silent as well, giving the right to speak to their master. Because of this, Noah and the hero's eyes met. Unexpectedly, the first to speak was the hero. "To be honest, I'm very surprised," the hero said to Noah in a voice that made people feel comfortable. "Although I've met many godslayers and fought many life and death battles with them, this is the first time I've received a letter of challenge." Yes, a letter of challenge. Noah had asked Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Huina to deliver a letter of challenge to the hero who had annihilated the Demon King. The form of the letter of challenge was unusually simple. It only stated the time and place of the battle. Because Noah had issued a letter of challenge to the hero, he had stayed outside the city obediently and waited for the battle to begin. "I'm also very surprised." Noah glanced at the hero. "I didn't expect you to accept my letter of challenge. I thought you would ignore everything around you and wave your divine sword at me like you did on the invisible island." Hearing this, the hero revealed a tired and bitter smile. He lowered his head and apologized to Noah. At that time I had just woken up, but I wasn't happy about it. Instead I was in a bad mood, so I acted rudely. Please forgive me. Seeing that the hero had lowered his head and apologized sincerely, not only Noah, but even Yarek was stunned. You? Noah looked at the hero and said with some uncertainty, "Are you really the god of disobedience?" If someone who didn't know the truth heard Noah's words, they would definitely think that he was asking the obvious. After all, the only gods who could wander freely on earth were the gods of disobedience who had deviated from the myths. However, Yarek felt that Noah's question was reasonable. This was because the hero in front of him really didn't fit the image of the god of disobedience. Because the god of disobedience had deviated from the myths and appeared on earth without permission, he would be devoured by the madness and become violent. Regardless of whether it was Velislana, who was known as the protector of the people, or Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom, there were no exceptions. However, the hero's words and actions didn't have any arrogance. Instead, he gave people a feeling of gentleness and seriousness, making people want to love and respect him. This feeling really didn't fit the temperament of the god of disobedience. The hero seemed to understand why Noah had such a question and couldn't help but shake his head. It's not strange that you would have such a question, but I am indeed a god of disobedience. Only by becoming a god of disobedience can a god freely wander on earth. This is a law that even the gods can't defy, and I am no exception. Then why do you look so rational? Yarek couldn't help but ask. Until now, none of the gods of disobedience we've met have been as rational and steady as you. Hearing Yarek's words, the hero's expression became a little sad as he said this. Because there is someone who has taken my place and endured all the distortions of the god of disobedience. As the hero spoke, a black shadow slowly appeared behind him. Like smoke, it kept twisting and turning. That is. Yarek narrowed his eyes. A god of disobedience? You guessed right. The hero smiled tiredly. This is a family member who has deep feelings for me. My brother who appeared as my god of disobedience took my place and endured all the distortions and arrogance of being a god of disobedience. Therefore, my essence hasn't been changed at all. It was because of this that the hero wasn't like the other gods of disobedience, who had a rather crazy side. It was also because of this that the hero didn't have the battle instinct of the steel hero. Instead, he was tired of the constantly repeating fate of war. Even if the 7 god slayers were born, he didn't want to wake up. This unexpected fact made Noah a little speechless. Even Yarek furrowed his brows tightly as he spoke. Since your essence hasn't been distorted, then we shouldn't have a reason to fight, right? No. The hero shook his head. Unfortunately, we have to fight. Why? Noah asked bluntly. Because you have a mission to destroy the Demon King? But I don't think you're very keen on this mission. You have a good eye. The hero looked even more tired. If possible, I also don't want to engage in meaningless battles. For this, I spent almost 1,000 years avoiding the mission to destroy the Demon King, and didn't want to wake up. In the end, I was reawakened. As he finished speaking, the hero looked straight at Noah. Since I've woken up, I have to carry out the mission to destroy the Demon King. Otherwise, I won't be able to fall into a deep sleep again. If I can't fall into a deep sleep and continue to stay on the ground, I'm sure you two already know what will happen. Noah and Yarek fell silent. If I continue to stay on the ground, when the time comes, the ocean and the land will change. Even the volcanoes will erupt and the sky will collapse. When the fire and wind spirit of this world reach the limit, this world will change and usher in an apocalypse. The hero sighed. If I want to change this situation, the only way is to fight. Either I destroy all the demon kings on the ground, or I am defeated by the Demon King. There is no other way. As he finished speaking, the hero raised his head and said with a sorrowful and determined expression, "No matter what the result is, I have to fight. So this is the reason why I have to fight." Chapter 1491. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became extremely heavy. Since ancient times, the gods and the godslayers were natural enemies. No matter what the situation was, both sides would be drawn by fate and meet each other. Godslayers were natural warriors. Disobedient gods viewed godslayers as enemies. Once the two sides met, it would cause all kinds of disputes. This was something that had never changed. However, the battle between gods and godslayers was basically a result of their own will. Yarek had never encountered a god of disobedience like the hero, who didn't want to fight at all but had no choice but to annihilate the enemy with a tired mentality. This way, even the Black Prince, who was known to be good at scheming, did not know how to react to this. Only Noah, after a moment of silence, looked at the hero with a somewhat pitiful gaze. "You are really pitiful." As soon as he said this, an indescribable murderous aura exploded in the room. The masked wind god, who had been quietly following the hero all this time, now exuded an astonishing murderous aura, which shrouded Noah's body. Although there was no way to see the masked wind god's face, everyone present could imagine it. The expression under the wind god's mask was definitely uncontrollable anger. It was the extreme anger that came from feeling that the king he followed was being insulted. This anger turned into a murderous aura that locked onto Noah's aura. Obviously, the masked wind god was very loyal to the hero. On the other hand, Lancelot, who was also a subordinate of the hero, was silent and did not do anything. However, the masked wind god's murderous aura was so strong that it caused the air to become slightly chaotic. Yarek's body instantly tensed up. Noah did not even look at the masked wind god. He only looked at the hero, who had a tired expression on his face, and said flatly, "But I don't think you want me to pity you, right?" "Of course." The hero smiled helplessly. "No matter what, we are both people who will have to pay the price of our lives in this duel. I have my reasons for fighting and you have yours. If you show mercy to me because of my reasons, it will only increase my sins. But, as you said, I also have my reasons for fighting." Noah looked directly at the hero. "So I won't show you mercy. That's for the best." The hero seemed to be relieved, and his expression relaxed. "But, as you can see, we have 3 people on our side and only 2 on your side. We are at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. Is that okay?" Hearing this, Noah was about to say something when a light and beautiful voice suddenly sounded in the room. "Since the enemy has prepared enough battle strength, then we will fight back with a battle strength that is 100 or 1,000 times stronger than theirs." When this dignified and extremely light and beautiful voice sounded in the room, a gust of wind swept through the surroundings. Flower petals were mixed in the wind, and a thin veil that looked like a fairy's feather robe was swept up. A slender and beautiful figure slowly appeared from the thin veil like a fairy's feather robe. As if dancing, she spun her body and slowly appeared in front of everyone. Everyone knows that Luo Tsuelian's fists and palms can kill an army of 1,000,000. She alone can defeat 10 million enemies. If you can obtain Luo Tsuelian, you will gain 100 or 1,000 times more combat power. "Husband, let this concubine lend you a hand." The newcomer was Luo Hao. "You?" Noah could not help but be stunned. "Why are you here?" "Today, I have been feeling uneasy on Mount Lu. Because of this, I made a divination and learned that husband has encountered a powerful enemy." Luo Hao took light steps and came to Noah's side. It was as if Noah was the only one in her eyes. She smiled sweetly. Although it is not appropriate for a woman to show her face in public, if you think about it carefully, other than being husband's concubine, Luo Tsuelian is also a valiant and skilled warrior. How could I not help my husband resolve his troubles? The one who reacted to this was not Noah, but the hero. "Your Excellency must be one of the current god slayers?" The hero looked at Noah and Luo Hao in surprise. "So, there's actually a king among the god slayers of the present day? You must be the hero who annihilated the demon king? I can sense an extraordinary aura from you." Luo Hao turned her gaze to the hero. "However, your question is foolish. Hero, although I, Luo Tsuelian, am an unparalleled ruler in the world, my husband is a king among kings who can easily subdue the world. I was once defeated by him, yet he took me in as his concubine. Is there something strange about that?" Hearing this, Noah really wanted to tell Luo Hao that this was a very strange thing. Why did she have to be taken as his concubine after being defeated by him? Presumably, these were the words that everyone wanted to say, including Noah. However, the hero nodded his head with a relieved expression. "I see. Then it is my negligence. Because I have been fighting for so long, I have never seen a godslayer in a relationship. Please forgive me for making a fuss over nothing. The ignorant are not guilty. I forgive you. Luo Hao accepted the hero's apology as if it was a matter of course. However, no matter how many reasons you have for offending my husband, you cannot be forgiven. Hero, if you are not prepared to be cut into pieces by Luo Zuelian, I will absolutely not allow you to point your sword at my husband. The hero smiled when he heard Luo Hao's declaration. It was a hearty smile that was not sad or tired. It was a smile that matched a hero. Just as you said, Your Excellency Luo Zuelian, I have already prepared myself for that. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely powerful curse power surged from the hero's body and vibrated outwards. The terrifying power of the curse caused the entire world to tremble. As if it was trembling. Both Yarek and Luo Hao's expressions turned grave when they sensed that unparalleled and terrifying curse power. Noah, on the other hand, raised his head and stared at the hero. No. More accurately, he was staring at the sword on the hero's back. Under Noah's gaze, the hero reached out his hand and slowly drew the sword from the scabbard on his back. Clang! An extremely dazzling white gold radiance flickered from the slowly unsheathed sword, illuminating the surroundings. The hero raised the dazzling divine saber high in the air and chanted loudly, Divine Saber of Salvation, reveal your true face to the world. The dazzling divine saber of salvation suddenly trembled. Immediately after, a mysterious and complicated square magic array suddenly flashed above the divine blade and soared into the sky, rising into the air. During this process, the profound and complicated square magic array rotated as it gradually expanded. By the time it was in the air and seemed to be embedded in the horizon, the square magic array had expanded to about 10 meters on each side. Noah, Luo Hao, and Yarek all raised their heads and looked at the square magic array. They saw that the 10-meter-long square magic array was divided into many small grids. There were weapons and armors in the grids. There were sabers, swords, bows, spears, axes, shields, rods, sabers, spears, cannonballs, rings, blocks that looked like red bricks, and so on. There were probably hundreds of weapons branded in the square magic array's grids, exuding an ancient and sacred aura. That scene reminded Noah of something. Manchala. It was a Japanese magic array with thousands of statues of gods and Buddhas drawn in a geometrical pattern. The manchala in front of them replaced the sky full of statues of gods and Buddhas with all kinds of weapons. Moreover, those weapons were not ordinary weapons. Noah knew the origins of those weapons better than anyone else. They were god relics that were famous in all kinds of myths and legends. That was right. They were god relics. At that moment, the hero displayed a treasure vault with thousands of god relics. Just like the Gate of Babylon. Chapter 1492. Whiz. The gigantic manchala formation hovered in mid-air. The weapons in it vibrated one after another as if they were wild beasts that had just been released from their cages and were ready to attack. Each of the weapons was waiting for the hero's order. As soon as the hero gave the order, the weapons that were famous in all kinds of myths would rain down like a storm, bombarding the ground below indiscriminately. Without a doubt, Luo Hao and Yarek were shocked by such an unexpected method. Thus, the hero explained out of goodwill. In the past, I was given the mission to kill the demon kings by the gods. I've come to the human world as the gods' representative. The hero pointed at the manchala formation in the sky. In order to help me kill the enemy who killed the gods, not only did the gods in the heavens establish an ancient covenant for me to use, but they also gave me countless weapons to help me complete the mission of killing the demon kings. The Savior Divine Sword is what these weapons look like. Therefore, this is the true form of the Savior Divine Sword. As soon as the hero finished speaking, the manchala formation in mid-air expanded again. In just an instant, the manchala formation that was only 10 meters long expanded to 6 to 7 kilometers long. The number of grids in the formation increased one after another, and god relics appeared in each of the grids. The ancient covenant that can increase my strength according to the number of demon kings that I have killed and the countless god relics that the gods in the heavens have given me are my trump cards to kill all the demon kings on the earth. Following the hero's loud declaration, the manchala formation in the sky exploded with lightning all of a sudden. Bang! Amidst the thunderous noise, the god relics in the manchala formation were covered by countless lightning bolts one after another. They turned into a rain of lightning and fell on the ground from all directions. The sky was already filled with thunderbolts and torrential rain that blotted out the sky. Everything in sight was covered by the god relics that had turned into lightning bolts one after another. Luo Hao and Yarek's expressions hardened slightly, and their bodies surged with curse power. Just as the two godslayers were about to unleash their authority, Noah, who was the only one watching calmly as the god relics containing immense god power descended from the sky, finally looked at the hero. "So that's how it is," Noah said as if he had understood something. "Only with the ancient covenant that can elevate one's divine power, and the countless god relics given by the gods can a hero kill all the demon kings since the beginning of time. However, it's a pity that your luck is very bad." Noah's eyes flashed with a glint. "You have been raised by the ancient covenant to a level that surpasses that of ordinary gods and godslayers. You will be surpassed by me, an alien. The countless weapons that the gods of the celestial realm have bestowed upon you will also be surpassed by my collection. Not a single one will be left behind." After saying that, Noah raised a hand. Buzz! As the space vibrated, golden ripples that looked like water waves appeared one after another, filling the entire space behind Noah. Various relics such as sabers, swords, spears, and halberds appeared one after another, imprinting themselves into everyone's eyes. The various relics such as sabers, swords, spears, and halberds carried an ancient aura that was definitely on par with the god relics in the Manchala formation in the sky. Thus, at this moment everyone understood. The weapons that appeared from the golden ripples that looked like water waves were also famous god relics that only existed in all sorts of myths. What? The hero finally had a change of expression. Impossible! Lancelot was shocked too. Even the masked wind god's body trembled slightly. Clearly it was extremely shocked. Under such circumstances, sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all kinds of treasures emerged from the golden ripples and shot out. They turned into beams of light and soared into the sky to welcome the heavenly thunder of salvation that was descending like raindrops. Bang! The relics that had turned into beams collided with the god relics that had turned into lightning. Terrifying sparks were created as if there was an explosion. Bang 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 bang. Amidst the muffled explosions, the rain of relics and the lightning of god relics that were falling from the sky collided hard. Sparks were created from the impact and spread mid-air. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky turned into a sea of fire. Dong! At a certain moment, the sea of exploding flames that had expanded to its limit directly exploded, turning the waves of fire into a shockwave. Like a flaming storm, it shook in all directions and even surged downwards like an erupting volcano, shrouding the ground below. Everyone was shocked to see the fire waves that were gushing down mid-air like waves. If they were hit by the shockwaves from the collision between relics and god relics, even if they were gods or godslayers, they would not be able to withstand it with their bodies. At that moment, Luo Hao immediately used divine feat. Yarek released the authority of lightning sparks. Lancelot instantly turned into a cloud of mist, and the masked wind god turned into a tornado, retreating rapidly. Only Noah and the hero did not retreat. Instead, they advanced. "All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now I will have the majesty of 10 mountains, the strength of hundreds of rivers, and the strength of thousands of giant dragons. The majestic me will have the ferocious power to slay dragons." Crimson flames rose from Noah's body and turned into scales that covered Noah's entire body. "I will protect myself with the heavenly thunder and lightning. Please bless me with the heavenly thunder. Please bless me with lightning so that I can turn into an immortal steel that can resist all evil in this world." Blue lightning flashed from the hero's body. It turned into lightning and covered the hero's entire body as well. With the crimson flames and blue lightning, the Demon King and the hero charged into the raging fire waves at the same time. Whoosh! As the sound of air breaking echoed in unison, the raging wave of fire that the god-slayers and disobedient gods had chosen to evade was torn apart like a piece of cloth by the crimson aura and the azure lightning. Then, the Demon King and the hero who tore the fire waves apart clenched their fists tightly while the other raised the divine sword in his hand. They charged at each other hard. Kaboom! An earth-shattering rumble was heard. An astonishing shockwave blasted out from the raging fire wave, dispersing the fire wave that was torn apart. Mixed with the shockwave surged in all directions. Among them, 2 figures covered in crimson flames and blue lightning were sent flying backward. They rubbed against the air and shot into the distance like cannonballs. However, the two figures that flew out quickly stabilized their bodies. Noah, who was covered in crimson flames, suddenly stopped in midair. He turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky. The hero, who was covered in blue lightning, landed on the ground. He raised his head and looked at Noah, who was soaring into the sky, and stomped on the ground. Bang! As the ground exploded, the hero, who had crushed the ground with his foot, shot up into the sky like a rocket, chasing after Noah as he soared into the sky. The Demon King and the hero both turned into streams of light and disappeared into the clouds in the blink of an eye, like shooting stars chasing each other. Seeing this, Lancelot and the masked wind god, who had returned to their physical bodies from their mist and weathered forms, wanted to chase after them, but they were shot down. Luo Hao, who had used the divine celerity to flash in front of the masked wind god, looked at him coldly. Although I don't know where you're from, since you're the vassal of that brave warrior, you should know your place. A battle between kings is not something a servant like you can interfere in. Yarek, who had turned into a stream of lightning, also appeared in front of Lancelot and smiled. We've known each other for a long time. It's time to settle our grudges. Don't you think so? Lancelot and the masked wind god, who were about to chase after the hero, suddenly stopped. They looked up and met Luo Hao's and Yarek's eyes. An unprecedented battle was about to begin. Chapter 1493. Whoosh! Amidst the sharp sound of breaking air, the two meteors chased each other and rushed into the sky. They made a turn above the clouds and heavily collided with each other. Boom! Amidst the astonishing muffled sound, a circular shockwave spread out like an explosion. It was like a substantial storm ring, shaking the surroundings, causing the atmosphere in the space to become chaotic, and let out a mournful wail. As the shockwave spread out in a ring shape, Noah and the hero's figures were finally revealed. As if pushed back by the shockwave, they quickly retreated backward. They were at an altitude of more than 3,000 meters. Therefore, there was no one here. Noah and the hero were both individuals with extremely powerful strength. However, the two of them had a similarity. That was, neither of them could fly if they were to rely on their own strength. Noah had incarnations such as storm and thunder, which allowed him to gain the ability to fly while he was using them. For example, he could control the wind to fly. For example, he could directly transform into thunder. However, Noah could not always use one incarnation. In that case, the advantage of being able to switch between incarnations for various situations would be gone. One had to know that the reason why Welslana was able to become the god of victory was because of his ability to adapt to various situations. Noah naturally could not give up this advantage. Fortunately, Noah still wore a flying magic tool around his neck. At that moment, Noah whispered softly, "Fly." The wing-shaped necklace around Noah's neck suddenly bloomed with a faint light. In the next second, Noah's figure stopped in midair and floated up. Like Noah, the hero did not have the ability to fly. However, the hero also had the power to solve all kinds of trivial problems. Spirits that float between heaven and earth, please give me strength. The hero, known as the Last King, stretched out his right index and middle fingers and quickly drew a holy seal in the air. At this moment, bursts of light particles suddenly flashed out from the surrounding space. Like fireflies, they gathered in the direction of the hero and enveloped his entire body. Everything had a spirit. Those firefly-like light particles were all miscellaneous spirits in the world. They did not have the power to compare to the god of disobedience. They did not even have a personality or intelligence. They were just illusory spiritual energy. Now, the hero called upon the spirits between heaven and earth to let them float around him, supporting his body that could not fly. At this moment, a figure cut through the air and shot in front of the hero as fast as lightning. A hand clenched into a fist, mixed with crimson air scales, and heavily punched the hero's chest. The attack was so sudden that even the hero could not help but be slightly surprised. Then he reacted. His entire body flashed with electric sparks, jumping on the surface of the hero's body. However, right at that moment, the crimson flames that surged out of Noah's body suddenly changed direction and turned into countless bolts of lightning. I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with 100, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who is on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. Amidst the sacred words, Noah's entire body burst out with astonishing electric light. Just like a warrior, violent electric sparks leaped up from the surface of his body. Under such circumstances, the fist that was aimed at the hero's chest also contained violent lightning, entangling with the leaping electric sparks on the hero's body. Beep, beep, beep. Amidst the fierce electric sparks, two types of blue lightning intertwined with each other, twisting together for a moment. The fist carrying the electric sparks did not stop at all. It directly passed through the layers of lightning and struck the hero's chest like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, Noah's fist was less than 5 centimeters away from the hero's chest. Even if the hero was the one who had annihilated the Demon King, it was impossible for him to defend himself at this moment. Because of that, the hero decided to completely ignore Noah's incoming punch. He suddenly raised the divine blade of salvation in his hand and ruthlessly chopped at Noah's neck. The hero was planning to exchange injury for injury. Noah could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. With the Leo's sovereign son in his body, Noah, who was invulnerable, should not be afraid of such a sharp blade attack. However, the hero's savior divine sword was no ordinary sharp blade. Not only was it the form of all the god relics that the heavenly gods had given to the hero, but it was also one with the hero. It was a divine sword that was like a clone of the hero. In other words, since the hero's body could release violent lightning, the savior divine sword would definitely be able to release lightning like electric sparks as well. In the end, even if he blocked the savior divine sword's attack, the lightning that bloomed on it would definitely cause damage to Noah. In addition to that, the divine sword was the most powerful god relic that could even cut a star. It was still unknown if the Leo constellation's sovereignty over the sun could surpass it. No matter what, Noah's intuition told him that he could not block this divine sword with his invulnerable body. Without any hesitation, Noah suddenly stopped his attack. His entire body turned into a bolt of lightning and appeared in front of the hero. Slash! The divine saber that cut through space instantly cut the lightning that had suddenly appeared into two halves, causing a tearing sound to ring out. The lightning that was cut in half immediately gathered together and shot out, creating a distance between them and the hero. Seeing this, the hero who had annihilated the Demon King chanted loudly, "Savior divine sword, the heavenly realm weapon that the heavenly gods have given you. Show your true power." A Manchala formation spun behind the hero's back. It expanded gradually and covered the hero's back. Inside, the god relics were covered in lightning bolts one after another. They turned into heavenly lightning that could save the world. They shot out like laser beams, covering the direction where the thunder god was retreating. The lightning that was shooting out stopped and turned into a human again in a flash. Buzz! Golden ripples that looked like water waves appeared and covered Noah's back as well. Subsequently, relics appeared one after another and shot out. They turned into beams of light and went straight for the god relic divine lightning that was attacking. Bang! 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 The treasures and god relics that were famous in various mythological systems collided like needles against an awl. They were like cannonballs that collided with each other. Sparks were set off amidst the muffled booms. Staring at the various relics that appeared from the golden ripples that looked like water waves that covered Noah's back, there was disbelief in the hero's eyes even though he had seen it before. Why? The hero could not help but ask. Why are you like me? Why do you have a weapon that only the gods of the heaven realm can have? Noah said calmly as he looked at the hero who had the Manchala formation hovering behind him. It's simple. It's because you have the heavenly gods behind you, but I have the world itself. The world itself? The hero mumbled. The world itself? Obviously, even the heroes who were favored by the gods of the heaven realm, and had annihilated countless demon kings since ancient times, could not understand what Noah meant by his words. Noah could not help but laugh as he said that. If you can't understand it, then there's no need to. No matter what, there has to be a winner between us. It's either you die or I die. If that's the case, what's the point even if you understand the reason behind it? The hero was momentarily stunned. After a moment of silence, he nodded in an open-minded manner. You're right. We don't need to understand each other in our battle. Instead, we need to fight each other. It's enough to know that. After that, Noah and hero exchanged gazes again, sparks flying from their gazes. The golden ripples that looked like water waves and the Manchala formation shone brightly. Chapter 1494. Just as Noah and the hero were engaged in the most intense battle in the world above the clouds, there were also two battlefields on the ground. One was the battlefield where Luo Hao and the masked wind god were. The other was the battlefield where Yarek and Lancelot were. After Noah and the hero flew into the sky, Luo Hao, Yarek, Lancelot, and the masked wind god each found their own opponents and began to fight. Whoosh! The wind howled above the ground as if it had turned into a tornado, encircling the entire battlefield. It was not a wind generated by nature, but a wind generated by the masked wind god's power. In the center of the huge tornado that surrounded the entire battlefield, Luo Hao and the masked wind god stood facing each other with a distance between them. Luo Hao looked at the wind god, who was covered in bandages and wearing a mask on his face, and said coldly, "Unknown wind god, tell me your name." Hearing that, the masked wind god's body surged with a huge amount of curse power, but he did not say a word and completely ignored Luo Hao's question. This caused Luo Hao's brows to furrow tightly as she cried out in a delicate voice, "You should be a famous hero, or else you wouldn't follow the hero with the title of the last king, and not even have the courage to tell me your name?" The masked wind god raised his face slightly and faced Luo Hao with his masked face, still not saying a word. If it were any other time, whoever dared to ignore Luo Hao like this would definitely be torn to pieces by the unparalleled Wulin Alliance Master. However, in the battle, Luo Hao was a famous Wuxia hero, so she immediately understood something. "I see. Can't reveal your real name?" In the world of Type Moon, the heroic spirits who descended in the form of servants would try their best to hide their real names in the Holy Grail War. This was because the heroic spirits were very famous heroes in all kinds of myths and legends, and each of them had their own stories. In these stories, the heroes' lives were described, and naturally the abilities and weaknesses of the heroic spirits were included as well. Under such circumstances, if one revealed their real name without permission, others would find the weaknesses of the heroic spirits themselves from the myths and legends and restrain them. This situation was also applicable to this world. Some gods of disobedience would openly announce their names, just to be worthy of themselves. However, some disobedient gods would also hide their true names to prevent others from finding their weaknesses. Since the masked wind god had concealed his real name, appearance, and even his voice and was unwilling to speak, he must be a famous god. Once his real name was exposed, it was very likely that his weakness would be exposed. No, it's not just a weakness. Luo Hao shook his head and looked directly at the masked wind god. "Since you're the vassal of the hero, doesn't that mean that the hero's true appearance will also be exposed once your true name is exposed?" These words had just sounded when the masked wind god suddenly lifted his head. The masked wind god stomped his feet on the ground and rushed towards Luo Hao. He clenched his hands into fists and punched towards Luo Hao without any fancy moves. Humph! In the face of the sudden attack from the masked wind god, Luo Hao snorted coldly. He neither advanced nor retreated. Similarly, he took a step forward. His right palm shot out at lightning speed, and his palm suddenly clapped. Bang! In the midst of a muffled sound that made people's hearts constrict, Luo Hao's seemingly weak palm actually slapped the masked wind god's fist away. Then Luo Hao raised his other hand and struck a hard palm in the direction of the masked wind god. In this palm, Luo Hao used the power of the mighty Vajra divine skill, and the unique skill of the 12 flying phoenix divine palms, combining the pinnacle of strength and skill, and struck out heavily. The palm, which was strong enough to split mountains and split rocks, caused the air to be compressed and burst, making a heavy sonic boom sound. It was extremely terrifying. The masked wind god did not seem to want to take such a palm head-on. His body suddenly moved, and he dodged Luo Hao's palm strike. Dong! The palm strike that landed in the air shook the atmosphere, causing the atmosphere to roar. The masked wind god, on the other hand, clenched his fists and put on an offensive posture. Facing Luo Hao's face, he threw out heavy fist shadows, smashing them like a storm. The fist shadows that filled the sky seemed to be chaotic, but in fact, they were faintly bombarding the weak points of Luo Hao's body. The method was quite clever. However, as the king of Wuxia, who was the best in the world in martial arts, Luo Hao easily saw through the mystery and made this female hero who was not inferior to men make a loud declaration. Are you also a person who has reached the pinnacle of martial arts? As he spoke, Luo Hao raised both of his palms and quickly took up the stance of the 12 flying phoenix divine palms. He brandished both of his palms, and the wind from his palms, which carried extreme strength, seemed to form an invisible cyclone, scattering all the gravel on the ground. Bang! In the next moment, the fierce palm wind and the heavy fist shadow suddenly collided, causing the ripples of strength to violently fluctuate. Immediately, Luo Hao and the masked wind god raised their palms and fists at the same time, and with a dazzling speed they quickly blasted out. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the fierce palm strike and the heavy fist collided again and again, stirring up a low muffled sound that rang out incessantly. In the center of the tornado, the two figures intertwined with each other. Every palm strike, every punch was almost a head-on collision, causing the vigorous chi to shake continuously. Luo Hao's 12 flying phoenix divine palms was indeed the pinnacle of martial arts. Although the palm strike seemed simple and there was nothing mysterious about it, the entire space was included in the attack range, making it impossible for people to escape. The masked wind god's entire body seemed to be in contact with Luo Hao. This was because the moment he approached Luo Hao, the masked wind god seemed to have turned into a meat grinder. Fists, elbows, fingers, legs, and even any part of the body at this moment erupted with incomparably powerful strength. Under such circumstances, the confrontation between Luo Hao and the masked wind god became extremely fierce. The fists and palms of both sides were like a torrential rain that vented on the enemy's body, causing the Han Chinese clothes on Luo Hao's body and the bandages on the masked wind god's body to be shaken until there were holes in them. Boom! At a certain moment, following a fierce collision, Luo Hao and the masked wind god both took a few steps back amidst the thump-thump-thump sounds. The first person to stabilize his body was the masked wind god. He stomped his foot on the ground and forcibly stabilized his body. The masked wind god suddenly raised a fist, which surged with a strong fluctuation of curse power. At this moment, even Luo Hao could clearly feel it. The masked wind god seemed to have used all the curse power in his body, condensing a force stronger than before. Immediately, the masked wind god rushed out quickly. That speed made the masked wind god's figure directly turn into a light shadow, like a mirage, rushing violently toward Luo Hao. No, that was not just fast speed. That was the power that Noah and Yerek both had seraphic speed. At this moment, the masked wind god suddenly released the power of seraphic speed and launched an attack. If it was an ordinary person, even a godslayer, faced with a sudden attack of seraphic speed, they might not be able to react in time. Unfortunately, Luo Hao did not. This was because this unparalleled Wuxia king had already mastered the mind's eye consummate skill that could even see through seraphic speed. The general will die soon. The soldiers will destroy his barracks, blood will flow in the wilderness, bones will be left in the border court, leaving only traces of the horse, leaving only the name on paper in the light ballad. Luo Hao's words turned into a violent demonic wind, which shook from his body. Boom! A powerful storm broke out in the field, directly hitting the masked wind god's body, sending him flying out violently. Like a kite with a broken string, he fell heavily to the ground. Not only did the attack send the masked wind god flying, it also tore apart the bandages on his body. As a result, the masked wind god's body was exposed to Luo Hao's eyes. Looking at the masked wind god's body that was hidden under the bandages, Luo Hao's eyes suddenly focused. Chapter 1495. Luo Hao silently stared at the body of the masked god of wind, who had fallen to the ground. At this time, the bandages wrapped around his body broke apart inch by inch, completely exposing the body hidden inside to Luo Hao's eyes. However, what was exposed was not the skin that a human should have, but a white fur. It did not look messy at all. Instead, it was quite soft but very dense white fur. Isn't it a human body? In Luo Hao's whisper, the masked god of wind jumped up very flexibly and stood up again. Looking at the broken bandages and exposed fur on his body, the masked god of wind was silent for a long time. After a while, he finally spoke for the first time since he appeared. It seems that there is no need to hide. With such a sentence, the masked god of wind directly tore the broken bandages on his body and took off his mask. The face under the mask, of course, was not a human face. It was an ape's face with a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. Excellency Ape, with white body hair and a height of about 180 centimeters, appeared in Luo Hao's eyes. He was somewhat similar to the great sage, Heaven's equal, and was wrapped in a red waistband. However, unlike the naughty and competitive expression of the great sage, Excellency Ape's expression was very mature, and even faintly had a feeling of being very intellectual and very wise. Excellency Ape with white body hair. Luo Hao's eyes flickered, and he seemed to finally understand something. In all kinds of myths there were many Excellency Ape with white body hair. However, the medium used by the brave man who followed Excellency Ape to receive the weapons given by the gods of heaven was Manchala. As mentioned before, Manchala was a Japanese magic array with thousands of gods and Buddhas painted in geometric figures. Tracing back to its origin, the origin of the Manchala square could be traced back to India, which was a doctrine advocated by the Hindu religion. In other words, the brave man who used the Manchala square to receive the weapons given by the gods of heaven was most likely a god in Indian mythology. In Indian mythology, when it came to Excellency Ape, who had white body hair and could manipulate the wind, there was only one god that came to mind. Although Luo Hao was extremely lacking in self-awareness, he was not a fool. Having lived for over 200 years, although Luo Hao couldn't be said to know all sorts of mythological systems like the back of his hand, he could still be said to be very knowledgeable. Thinking that the Excellency Ape in front of him was very likely to be the famous divine monkey in Indian mythology, and the hero he followed was the god who annihilated the demon king, Luo Hao was surprised. I see. Is that the hero's true identity? Have you guessed the real name of my master? The white Excellency Ape slowly clenched his fist and stared at Luo Hao. There's no other way. I can't let you leave this place. Excellency Ape's body burst into a violent whirlwind. Although it is my master's duty to annihilate the demon king as a subordinate, it shouldn't be too much for me to carry it out on your behalf, right? Do you want to keep me here? Luo Hao smiled, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. You are indeed a famous hero, but if you want to keep Luo Zuelian, there should be a limit to your arrogance. Well, the master you follow will be defeated by my husband. In that case, as my husband's concubine, I can eliminate these useless soldiers and crab generals, so as not to ruin my husband's reputation. After that, Luo Hao's feather-like robe began to shake, and the magic storm also swelled from her body and swept away in an instant. In the face of me, the god of wind, you actually used the wind to fight back? Excellency Ape said sarcastically. What a fool! How dare a mere beast question Luo Zuelian's ability? Luo Hao's body surged with amazing curse power. Very well. Let me engrave the power of the unparalleled king of Wuxia deeply into your soul, and repent when you go to hell. The extremely violent whirlwind surged wildly from Luo Hao and Excellency Ape, cutting the ground, disturbing the atmosphere, and bringing out a harsh whistling sound that resounded throughout the world. Then the two raging storms, which were enough to tear the earth apart, hit each other like violent tsunamis. The outcome would be decided in a few seconds. When Luo Hao and the white Excellency Ape were fighting fiercely on the other side, Yerek was in a rather embarrassing situation. Boom! Accompanied by a roar, the entire ground burst open, setting off thick sand and dust, and stirring up a powerful impact force. It carried pieces of gravel and shook in all directions. Yerek, whose whole body was covered with electric sparks, was like being slapped by a huge wave. He rolled out of the thick sandstorm in a very embarrassing way. After rolling on the ground several times, he stabilized his body. Chi! At this time, in the thick sand in front of him, a black shadow suddenly rushed out. With a sharp sound, it appeared in front of Yerek in an instant. It was none other than the knight on the white horse, Lancelot. Lancelot, who was riding on his beloved horse, raised the scale-shaped spear in his hand. With a shake of his arm, the spear violently stabbed at Yerek. Looking at the momentum, if Yerek was stabbed, even if he was lucky, he would be reduced to the same situation as yesterday, with a big bloody hole in his body. Looking at the rapidly enlarging spear tip, Yerek released the power of lightning and fire, and let the electric spark soar on his body. His body turned into a flash of lightning and trembled strangely. Puff! With a tearing sound, the spear fiercely pierced Yerek's chest. However, Lancelot's body suddenly stagnated. This was because not only did the spear not pierce through Yerek's body, But blood also didn't spurt out as expected. Instead, the spear directly pierced through Yarek's back as if it had pierced through air. Only then did Lancelot realize that something was wrong. Afterimage. As soon as his voice fell, the figure of Yarek, whose chest was pierced, distorted and disappeared. After releasing the power of lightning and speed, Yarek could even create afterimages. In this regard, Lancelot only exclaimed, then suddenly raised the spear in his hand and swung it. The end of the spear was like a windmill, fiercely smashing into the space beside Lancelot. Bang! The spear body, which contained a powerful force, heavily smashed with a muffled sound. A figure appeared beside Lancelot without any warning, and was directly sent flying by the spear that smashed towards him. Ugh! Yarek could not help but let out a muffled groan. With electric sparks all over his body, he finally stabilized his body and landed on the ground with difficulty. As soon as he landed on the ground, Yarek immediately knelt on one knee, covered his chest, coughed a few times and muttered somewhat gloomily. Sure enough, for me who is good at using the power of lightning and speed, the knight who can see through the lightning and speed is my biggest nemesis. Although this was what he said, Yarek still stood up with difficulty. Lancelot, who was riding on the white horse, turned around and looked condescendingly at Yarek, who was struggling to stand up, and said in a seemingly happy tone, "Your speed is indeed quite outstanding and you use it well. Unfortunately, if it's just speed, it won't be able to defeat me." "I think so too," Yarek said very calmly, as if he could not see his own embarrassing state. "Then, I'll play a little trick." After saying this, Yarek's body burst out with extremely bright electric sparks, and his body trembled violently. Immediately, under Lancelot's surprised gaze, two figures that looked exactly the same as Yarek split from his body. "This is," Lancelot said with some surprise. Under such circumstances, Yarek, who was split into three, said in unison, "My power is not only to enter the world of lightning and speed. For example, I can turn myself into lightning, eliminate my aura, conceal my movements and so on. I can even create doppelgangers just like this." As soon as he finished speaking, the three identical Yareks all turned into lightning, split into three directions, and suddenly shot toward Lancelot's direction. Looking at the three lightning bolts shooting toward him, Lancelot frowned.